You all right?
I'm good. That was some hot tea.
Okay, that's good. Well, we're about to talk about some more hot tea. Holy I'm still green in the background. What the hell, guys?
Hey, you don't look green.
It's usually when I raise my arm. We are live, but it's cool. That's what they're here for. They're here to hear me babble on about systems.
This is like a behind-the-scenes look at how the anxiety takes over before we go live.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I
burn my tongue. You worry about what color the screen is and the back. I think you look fantastic. I'm looking at both. I see you on this screen and I see you on the.
I'm just trying to reduce the spill. And the problem is it kind of reduces the color out of my face, so I look a little more whiter than I do. And I don't want anyone to have any doubts. This is 100% Latino over here.
Bring that heat, son.
Bring the heat. Let's go, boy. Okay, we got 3 viewers. Damn, that's solid. That's a solid. 4 viewers. Oh shit. Okay, now
that's a California. That's a California too.
All right, everyone. All right. Okay, I'm starting now. I swear to you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show by Game Masters for Game Masters, where we take a deep dive on some of our favorite RPG systems. Tonight, I'm joined by my colleague and friend, the Cultaholic himself, Mark Q. Anderson. You may know him as one of the faces of Gehenna Gaming, but you may not know that Mark does all the marketing side of Gehenna Gaming as well. He has a new 5-part actual play beginning tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, Echoes of the Past, right here on Gehenna Gaming's Twitch. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is my very first deep dive, and I'm super excited.
Deep dive!
One point of order. We have to turn the music off.
Okay, I should have just fixed that.
That's okay. Or you just turn it off. They can just hear a big noises. While you're doing that, I'm super excited to be here. This deep dive series, I've been watching on the periphery as my boy Nick has been doing it every other week, consistently.
Yes.
Bringing on people to talk about different game lines, having really serious conversations, sometimes goofy conversations on various, favorite games. And my favorite game of all time is Colt. And not of all time. It's my favorite game right now. It's Colt. Ever since, I would say about a year ago when I found Colt, I fell in love with it. I bought the book and the design really pulled me in. I'm a designer, I'm a marketer. So obviously all that stuff really gets me going. And Colt has it in spades. I mean, especially Divinity Lost, the newest edition, which I believe is the 4th.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just making sure. All right, the music's good. We're all good. Much better. Perfect. Exactly. Mark is amazing. This is, like he said, it's one of the best games right now. This game's awesome. This game is jam-packed. This game just has everything. So, honestly, I was having a hard time deciding where we're going to start tonight because there's just so much to unpack. But let's go ahead and let's give it a try.
We're gonna try. I mean, it's a mammoth of a game, and this game in particular has a little bit of some notoriety.
Oh yeah.
And what's funny is that being a Vampire the Masquerade and going to conventions and featuring Vampire the Masquerade games at the convention, people going, "Oh, great! Here come the vampire people." I can't even imagine bringing Colt to a convention. One day I will. One day when the apocalypse is over, bring Colt to the nearest convention. I can't even imagine the eye rolling and the "Oh my God, the edgelords have arrived" type of.
In their various piercings and black leather corsets have arrived.
Exactly. Well, because I do call this the black metal of TTRPG.
It is, honestly, I think that's a title that is well deserved. And before we even start the show, I just want to give a very extended content warning. I know we usually talk about some crazy stuff here on the stream. We did Alien and Monster Hearts, but I'm telling you, this is going to be our darkest episode yet. There's going to be a lot of talk about violence, about gore, about very sensitive subjects, about reality, it's all in here. So if you're the type to get squeamish, if you're the type to get uncomfortable, there's a lot of other content on this channel that, I think that you can gnash your teeth into. But yeah, Colt is a very, very dark game.
It is, and I think that in order to, I'm paraphrasing. He talked about the idea of appreciating the lightness of life aspects, and we like horror here, so we're used to that kind of thing. But Colt takes it and pushes the envelope pretty hard. So I think it's good that you're starting this stream. I'm also going to be doing the same thing. I always do. Even with the game that you played in, I'm pretty sure I started with a pretty hefty content warning because Colt just has a lot of that. If you crack open the book and go to page 176, I think it is, or 220, it's got some pretty rough imagery, and you need to be kind of ready for it. And if you have delicate sensibilities, it's probably not for you.
Yeah, and that'll be something we talk about the book itself, like, yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna save it all for the deep dive. Let's not give any more hors d'oeuvres, and let's go straight into the main course. Are you ready to dive, Mr. Mark Q. Anderson?
I've got my snorkel. I've got my wetsuit, or is it dry suit? I've got my suit. I got my flippers. I'm ready to dive in deeply into Colt.
All right, here we go. All right, first off, though, I'm gonna take it a step back before we touch the game. You're on a cusp of a huge new thing. You got the premiere of your actual play tomorrow. Is there anything that you can, kind of review to us about your state right now before the show premieres, and maybe give us a little bit of a sneak peek?
Yeah, I can. I'm nervous. I'll tell you why. Because one very, very big reason why I'm nervous is because I always get anxiety before I stream. More importantly, I have some amazing players that are so good. I have the Dungeon Master from Fast Times at D&D High. Her name is Persephone. If you haven't listened to this podcast, I highly suggest you download it. It's pretty great. She's a really good DM. Kel Skellington is a professional LARPer. She's a model. And you can't really. She was recently just on the Carrion Comfort LARP discussion with Matt Webb, so she is a professional. Zachary Valdu from the Vancouver by Night, ATL by Night, on our last Cold stream. He's such a good player. We have you, who's one of my favorite RPers. You were so good at just diving into a character and living it. So I have some pretty big shoes on these podcasts.
Well, I'm super excited for you because last time I played Colt, it was honestly probably my favorite game of that con. It was that Safe Con. And yeah, it just blew my mind. That was the first time I ever played Colt.
And you didn't really know what to expect either. Like, I don't think you read even the book before.
No, I got the PDF right afterwards.
Yeah, I gave a little bit, I gave you guys a little bit like a quick start and everything like that, but I didn't give anybody the book or anything. So I don't saw anything outside of like a little change.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research for this episode, so let's hopefully it pays off.
Well, I'm sorry. You now look at the stream.
It's looking back at me. So, but I'm not letting you go without that saying any sneak peek, anything we should expect.
Yes. So the game itself is called Echoes of the Past, which is I guess I'm gonna call it our own interpretation of the scenario that was fairly recently, in the past year or two, scenario for Call of Divinity Lost that was originally written in the 1990s. It's called Echoes, or an Echo from the Past is what it was originally called. Written by Gunilla Johnson and Michael Pedersen, and then translated by Matthias Fredriksson from Red Moon Role Playing. And I've always wanted to run this. I think it's a really cool concept. It's a really cool scenario. but it deals with some pretty heavy themes. I'm calling it like a religious horror. It's got a lot of kind of statements on religion, particularly Catholicism, Christianity as well. It might be offensive to some people who have a very religious worldview, so just be wary of that. But it's a cult game, so it's going to be dark. I also have players I'm giving a lot of agency to. One of the cool things that I'm going to be doing for this game is, for every game we have a consent form that we use. What are your green lines? What are your yellow lines? What are your red lines? Like, what's okay, what's not okay, so that I can modify my game appropriately, customize it to the players so that everybody has a good time. And at the same time, kind of curate who's playing in this one, because it deals with something very specific, that religious horror part. There are certain players that I probably wouldn't be able to get, if they were sensitive to that, or I would have to change it. So that's, and if I were to change the religious horror aspect, it would completely change the scenario altogether and make it a completely different game. So having the consent form is extremely important. But I also know how I run games. And I like body horror, and I like pushing envelopes. I like pushing the line a little bit. Nothing to really take any agency away from players so much as to explore some of the more darker aspects of horror. So we're using a safe word, which we don't know what it is yet. We're going to decide it tomorrow what that safe word is, which is very typical for a cult. It's actually in the mechanics. There's a whole section on how to go through picking a safe word. But when that safe word is invoked by one of the players, you get so much agency. Basically, you get the conch shell. Basically, you get put into the GM seat for a very short period of time to turn back the dial on something that a NPC has done or said, or a thing that has happened, or to move things forward, to move on to the next scene, to either fade to black or rewind the tape, or have the NPCs take a completely different action, which I think is really interesting because it keeps me in check. But also, it also makes the safe word a little more compelling. So if I do push the line just a little bit, it makes everybody feel comfortable to go, you know what? I'm not okay with this. I'm going to say pineapple or whatever. And then now I've got this like cool little card that I can use and play immediately. And it makes the game that much more interesting.
Okay. Before I continue on, I did not realize I left the intro music running, which is why they couldn't hear us before with the music. Really quick, some people didn't hear the cast. Can you tell us the cast for Echoes one more time?
Yes, I can. So obviously I'm in there. I'm in the GM seat. I don't matter. Who matters more importantly is Persephone. She's the dungeon master from Fast Times at D&D High. It's a D&D 5e actual play podcast. Go check that out. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Twitch. You can find it wherever podcasts are sold. Raquel Skellington. She's a professional LARPer. She's a model. She is an insanely good cosplayer. Like
her costumes are crazy.
So good. And if you've seen any of the marketing for the night in question from Jackalope LARP, then you've definitely run into some of her work. Go find her on Twitter. Zachary Vaudu from ATL by Night and Vancouver by Night. Sorry, Zach, if I pronounced your last name wrong. He was actually on the last Cult stream, The Green Room, with you. He was a great player. He killed it. And then obviously we have my boy Nicholas. Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm excited to expand my acting roles on this. So it's gonna
be really
awesome.
Good, man. Like you live a character when you're like, okay, this is my character, and this is this is one of my favorite parts of playing in a game.
Well, and as I said before, like that was like some of my favorite parts of like that was an awesome game, and you were an amazing GM. But I've given you a little bit too much of a rub down in our introductory. If people didn't hear it before because the music was playing, it's time for me to just tell you right now. Reiterate again: content warning, huge content warning, amazing content warning. There's a lot of big stuff. I don't have any water, Big Dadum, so I have a drop. There you go.
I've got tea. It's really hot, but I'm gonna drink for you, Big Wet Dad.
Huge content warning. We're talking about sensitive subjects, violence, gore. Yes, I am Nick. Oh, is something wrong? No, they can hear me. Okay. Violence, gore, sexuality, and just really sensitive themes. I probably said that twice, but it bears saying that we have to say it once.
We do. It's a tough game. If you have delicate sensibilities, if you're squeamish, just use caution with this game. That doesn't mean the game's not necessarily for you. It just means that some of the more intense things that we're going to be talking about tonight are definitely a part of this game and it's in the culture of this game. So use caution and take the children out of the room. If your kids are here, kick them out. Send them to bed.
Fuck it. We're not doing a break. We're making up for all the time you just lost doing that. It's going straight through. Mark, you got your snorkel. We just talked about one point. We're going back down. All right. Just to get us along, give me a rundown of Colt. If someone walked in and was like, what are we talking about? What the hell are you talking about? Mark, what the fuck is Colt?
Okay, Colt, first of all, is the black metal. Kult Divinity Lost is the newest edition of the black metal of tabletop role-playing games. It encompasses all my favorite parts of horror, everything from fear, from losing your mind to losing your grip on reality. It's got demons, it's got gore, it's got blood. You once were a divine creature. You once were a god, a creature of divinity, and now you have fallen. And you have now been put into a prison called Elysium. This Elysium is our everyday life. I am passing the time as I doom scroll through my Twitter feed, and I rage tweet at whomever I'm angry at that day, or I don't know, watch copious amounts of pornography to distract myself from the coming dread that I have fallen and I've lost my wings. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, there are creatures and demons behind the veil of reality that are hunting you down, and other creatures that want to keep you in the dark. That's Kult Divinity Lost, baby.
That's an amazing, exceptional. That's what the people want to say. That's what everyone wants to say. Colt is definitely, like, I feel like it's one of those games where it's like, you never want to admit you want to play in them, but you really do, because it is that game to kind of lose yourself completely in just the situations and like the character. And what is your, this is like we talked about this before, this is arguably your favorite and not most talked about system. What about Colt keeps like drawing you back into it after like all this time?
Well, okay, so I'm a huge fan of Clive Barker. I'm a huge fan of body horror. I'm a huge fan of like the Hellraiser series, and all of that is in the very DNA of this game. This game was influenced by the Hellbound Heart, the Hellraiser, the book that Hellraiser was based off of. Mm-hmm. And what draws me to it is there's also a weird, it's going to sound weird, but there's also like a undertones of uncomfortable sexuality with some of these creatures and uncomfortable biology. It puts things like your mortality up right in your face, right? Some of the creatures are pretty, like they're beautiful and they're gory and they're gross,
in a horrific way.
Right? Yes, like Hellraiser, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what draws me in. And then when I started running the game, it's like I took to it like a duck to water. I'm good at running cults, so
you got the mind for it. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing, but
I don't think so.
I'm pretty thankful for it, to be honest, because it really has developed, and you really have pushed some amazing games on us for it.
I wonder if like when I was applying for jobs, if any potential employers found one of my cult streams and goes, I think we're gonna pass on this one.
Hopefully not. Hopefully that's not what they go and see. But you know, it's so
I'm okay with it.
It's you be who you are. It's 2020, baby. I gotta talk about, so you kind of briefly touched on like the Hellraiser series obviously being like a personal influence. So what's your personal relationship with this like game, and then what about religious cult based horror in general? Like what is your relationship growing up with that kind of horror?
So I wasn't, that's a really good question. So I wasn't raised with, I was raised to kind of figure spirituality and religion out. I wasn't really raised in a really super religious house, not a super religious household at all. And very like open and whatever you want to be. And when I was in high school, I'm like, I like Satanism, and my mother was okay with it. So, you know, I've always allowed myself, or have been allowed since I was a kid, to explore things that are interesting, and I've always kind of had a dark interest. That probably comes from trauma, because I grew up in a pretty abusive household, and I'm sure that some of it comes from a pretty harsh life experience really early on. And I think that a lot of people who do experience early childhood trauma are drawn to this kind of stuff. I mean, the common thread that I found with multiple people that have the same kind of interests as me, that are very specific like this, even things like really harsh imagery, oftentimes, and this is not always the case, but sometimes, and it's fairly common, that people come from are probably dealing with some dark stuff in their lives, and this is the best way to do it. And I was also a scared kid, so anything that gives me an emotional response, I'm immediately attracted to.
Damn, that's a great answer. So would you say there's almost like a therapeutic effect to playing Cult?
Oh God, yeah. So yes, I mean, in your game, right? Like, let's look at in if no one's ever seen the Green Room, after the stream, go watch the Green Room. It's a very strangely emotional game. Like, I wasn't meaning for this game to be really emotional at all. I was really meaning it to be like, let's go backstage at a Marilyn Manson concert that goes wrong, right? And the end of the game became such an emotional, heart-wrenching experience for everybody, but felt like birthing an emotional, or taking an emotional dump. Like, it felt like there was some stuff that was kind of worked through, not just on like the characters, the player characters, but like the players themselves. Like, I was watching you guys all interact and play, and at the very end, especially when, like, there's a couple times, but especially when, like, Zach's character decided to go off with, the creature that was, taking him to the other side. I felt this weird feeling of relief and release, but also, like, I felt bad, and I'm like, this is such a beautiful moment for this person whom his backstory was fairly messed up, which we never really got to explore. So I had a different relationship with this player character than your characters did. So there's a way that you can kind of interact with frightening things, or interact with, like, intense scenes without actually interacting with them. Like, I guess, call it a simulation, right? Like, when you are experiencing something horrifying and it's real, it's not monsters. It's like really horrifying stuff. It's people in the hospital, it's car accidents, it's whatever. But when you're in a game like this and you're experiencing a monstrous event with strange reality ripping apart, and you're forcing yourself to, like, face all of that, you're almost simulating that kind of intensity, and it juxtaposed to the real life horrors that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. It almost makes those things seem more bearable. I wake up in the morning and I have a tough day, and it's one of those, I call it like a gum in your hair day, when everything goes wrong. And everything can go wrong, but you don't have monsters crawling through the walls and pulling you into Inferno. So I guess that's good.
I would say that itself is like a analogy, for deep-rooted fears and anxiety and concern. There's just so much to unpack in this game, and I think, like, I feel like that's horror in general. It's like sometimes you just have, we have some hype train incoming.
What is that? What's a hype train?
I have no idea what the hype train is.
Hype train! What's a hype train?
I have no idea, but I think I'm gonna play some what are those horns? Yeah, what's the horns?
Pew, 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 pew.
There we go. MLG air horns coming at you, everyone. We got the hype train.
Ride the train. The hype train.
Hype train.
What do you do when the hype train comes rolling into your town? What are you gonna do?
That was almost a promo right there. That might be a question for at the end of the.
Sorry, it's been a while since I watched wrestling. All right, where were we before the hype train? Sorry,
before the hype train. We were just talking about, like, you answered that question amazingly, and just how, like, it's horror in general can just be this this vehicle for all these things to just unpack.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that's why people watch horror at the end of the day, or experience horror. Obviously because they like it, but because I always feel like, especially one of the best things about like watching a horror movie or just experience horror is you always have that fear and tension, but at the end it's always released. No matter how it turns out, like you always put it down. You go home and you always feel like a sense of relief of just releasing you.
Yeah, it's you. Especially those movies that really stick with you, or movies that have really intense, like there are some movies that build and build and build and have like a really intense kind of set of horrors at the end, right? Like I guess let's take movies, right? Like let's take Hereditary, which is an amazing movie, and it's a near perfect film. I would say it might be a perfect film, but like the way that it builds and builds and builds and has this like horrifying apex.
Yeah.
It's such a, like, you get beaten emotionally throughout the film, and then at the end they just straight punch you in the face a couple of times with some real horrifying stuff. And I don't know if the emotional trauma stuff in the beginning makes the like physical typical horror stuff at the end more palatable, but it definitely pairs very nicely, and at the end you feel like, oh my god, that was a ride. Oh, like when you get off of a roller coaster and you feel like invigorated and scared and like nervous and also slightly emotional, and oh my god, what the hell did I just watch?
Yeah, I feel the same way with his other film Midsummer, and I just feel like Midsommar, sorry. Yeah, it's just. Were you gonna say you didn't like it? Oh.
No, I like it a lot. I like it a lot. I just didn't get the same, I don't know, intensity.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the opposite because I'm not really a huge fan of Hereditary, so I think it's really interesting. Yes, that's an opinion for another stream though.
It is. Let's keep going. We're talking about Colt.
We're calling about Colt, but it's good to know that there's just a lot of stuff you can. All right, so break down. You want to play Colt, or you want your players to play Colt? They're like, well, what are some media they should consume? Give me a movie that wasn't Hellraiser, and then maybe give me a book.
Oh, okay. A movie that isn't Hellraiser, that is like Colt. The best example that I can think of is In the Mouth of Madness.
Boom.
That's a perfect Colt movie. That's perfect. People say that it's a perfect Call of Cthulhu movie. No, that's Colt.
Like the Sam Neill one, right?
Yeah, the Sam Neill one.
Yeah, I love that movie. Yeah. Dude, Sam Neill will just be making some great horror movies. All right, and then what about
book? Hellbound Heart.
All right, awesome.
That is the impetus of that genre. There would be no Colt if there was no Hellbound Heart.
And then, little bonus question: if you had to pick a black or death metal album to represent Colt, which would you pick?
That's a hard one. Shit, that's a hard one. That represents Colt. I don't know.
Come back to it later. Okay.
Yeah, let's come back to it later.
Chew on that question.
Because there are so many albums that have a lot of anger, but not a lot of that sadness. I don't know. Let's get back to it. Next question.
Next question.
Sorry.
So no, that's perfectly fine. You know, it takes a big man to admit that he might just not know at that point in time. So we're going right. We're going to dive into the pre-session. So break down at its core. What is the main themes of Colt? Like, what is it trying to portray, and what type of story does that system want you to tell?
Oh, that's a good question. So, basically, when you're looking at Colt, you're looking at a Gnostic story. Gnostic in the very classical sense of the word, with the Gnostic Christians that had this belief that, you know, there was a God, and that God has now been either usurped or replaced or is gone, right? And we're living in our own personal hell, and that hell is a kind of prison. And the prison in which we live is our day-to-day mundane existence. Mm-hmm. So it's a Gnostic horror, especially in the imagery, with things like utilizing the Kabbalistic tree of life with the Sephiroth as part of the system, using a lot of that same kind of imagery. The idea that there is a Inferno, that there is a Purgatory, that there is a Gaia. These are taking all the worlds and putting them in little spheres is very Gnostic, and is very like I guess classic Gnostic interpretations of the heavens and hell. So what type of story does the system really want you to play? As you're discovering the horrors of reality, you are gaining the powers of divinity. That's the type of story
the
system
okay.
wants you to play.
It sounded like you were gonna go off on a huge tangent, and I was waiting for it, and I was like, maybe it's a dramatic pause. But no, that's great. So, would you say this game is more reflected on, like, actually being within a cult, or being an outlier discovering said cults?
I think there's cults in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the name is Colt. The word of the game is Colt with a K, not with a C. I don't see Colt being such a culty game as Call of Cthulhu, for example, which is very culty. It's almost as if there's a conspiracy all around you. Like, you are leaving the club with your boys. Unfortunately, no one's taking home a girl that day or a boy that day. No one's having a good time that night. They had a good time at the bar and the club, and now they're going home. So you're gonna go lick your wounds and end the night. But on your way home, as you're walking back to your flat, you see down in an alleyway somebody's pulling bags out of a side door in an alley, and those bags look suspiciously like body bags. And when the person looks at you, their face doesn't look human. Their shape looks human, but their face looks horrified, like a demon. And you kind of, what the fuck, guys? You see that? And you look again, and it's back to normal bags, normal trash bags, normal faces.
I like that. Would you say though, it's almost like, because like looking into it, like it's almost about your character's like journey.
Yeah.
You're peeling back like the illusions and like seeing what the world's really about. And I don't know. I don't know a lot of games where what I like about Cole is I don't know a lot of games where a lot of the focus is on your own personal evolution, more of your like personal philosophy and outworld view, rather than like I get stronger when I level, or I get better stuff when I level, such and such.
What's cool about this is that like as bad things happen to you, you become that's where the upgrades are. Like as there's a stability rating, right? And stability it's kind of like an insanity meter, but not really. Like it's how can you hold yourself together? How can you withstand external stimuli or internal stimuli of this stuff happening to you? And as you like fail your rolls and go down that stability meter, it's now easier for you to see behind the veil. And the more that you see behind the veil, the more likely you are to be able to enrapture, like hold your powers that you once had when you were divine. Magic powers.
Yeah, like awesome shit.
Yeah, like the ability to see through walls, the ability to like hear people's thoughts or say things like other people say, or see the future.
So a question I was going to ask you, but you honestly went over it already. It's just because Colt's a pretty heavy game, the idea of session 0 is super important. And something that I've noticed is that you have a great handling of safety tools in session 0. A lot of people might not see that because, it's not something we normally show on camera.
Right.
But Mark has amazing handling of safety tools. Especially when using the consent forms and just getting everything out in the open that I've seen, especially when we're setting up for Echoes of the Past. So is there anything else before we move on, because it's just like kind of the safety question I like to ask people.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would recommend to your GMs like that you should do in order to keep everyone in a comfortable state of mind when playing this game?
Individualize the consent process. Like when you reach out, like I would suggest using a consent form just because it's easier. Write down what the type of game you're looking to play, right? Like if you're looking to play a pink mohawk, black trench coat, shoot 'em up KMFDM style game, write that down, because if someone says I'm not into that, you can't. It's like, oh well, shit. Maybe you shouldn't play, right? Or maybe we should find somebody else. Or like, I don't know. It's kind of like have you start the conversation. You say, this is the game I want to play. Are you cool with it? And also, what are the things that you're okay with and not okay with? And follow up with them. Like, talk to them about the bits, about the little things, the yellows, right? The ones that they're like not saying, okay, absolutely not. No homophobia. Okay, fine. You don't really need to talk to anyone about that. But when they put a yellow on things like drug addiction, it's like, okay, are you like, it's yellow, so what does that mean? Like, does that mean that this is something we cannot have in here at all and you're just being nice? Or is it something that you're worried about a particular display of drug addiction that may be upsetting to you? And if not, like, what are the ways that, like, why is this yellow? What are the ways that we can include this? This is something that you just want to have in a red. And I've had players say, you know what, actually, I don't really want any of that. And then you go, okay, well then, awesome. So now you know, and now like the player feels like you give a shit about them as a human being. And then you can say, if there's anything else that they want to talk to you about, like if a player's worried about PvP, for example, which is something that's common in Cult. Like, are you worried about like, I'm worried that, I really want to play a game where everybody gets along, and I'm worried that people are going to attack me. It's like, okay, all right, cool. Let's talk about that. Like, if that's a deal breaker, then I can go to the other players and say, hey, listen, just no PvP, and who cares? Like, everyone's still going to have a good time. Yeah. So I would say, individualize the process and touch base on your players individually, not just in a group, and give them a safe space to be able to say, I'm not okay with X. Because they'll definitely say in a public setting, I'm okay with, ABC. But if there's a thing that they're not okay with, they're a little uncomfortable with it. And as human beings, we're so ingrained just to go with the flow and to go with like group mentality, or go with the group and just like be silent while everyone else, in suffering and silence while everyone else is just going along. So if you can give them an opportunity to voice their concerns to you before you even get into the game, it'll make your job as a GM that much easier.
Excellent answer. Very, very excellent answer. And just following up on that, do you feel like Cult is one of those games you have to warn players about, that like being more emotionally taxing than others?
I didn't think about that. Maybe. I would say that it, as far as warning about the emotional taxation of it, if players are allowing themselves to be not so emotional about things, then it won't go there. I won't ever push it there. I might strike a chord with people, like my driver game, the driver Saturday night one shots that we had with the lady and the guy who was this crazy Christian person who was definitely eating people behind the scenes, and his daughter who was, God, was she being abused in the house? Like, what is going on in the household? Like, I probably struck a chord with people, but I was never like shining a direct light on it. And I left it up to the players to either accept it as, oh, what a weird house. Let's go, guys. Or like, okay, this is bothering me and let's do something about this. If someone wanted to save that woman, by the way, if any one of the players says, I want to get this woman out of here, I would have allowed that to happen. They could have done any numerous things. They could have grabbed one of those like people emus and thrown a rope on it and like threw her on one of it and like rode off into the sunrise with them. Like any number of possibilities could have happened. All right. But they got emotional with it, and that's okay.
Yeah, sometimes that's where the game takes you. So now to talk about something we were referring to before. Mark, you're a designer. I'm a designer. Yes. And I know from both of us, it's especially working on specific projects, we love style over the norm. Something that we get into a lot of debate with Ian and Mark and everyone else. A lot into little debates here and there. In your artist brain, how does Cult compare? Does it hold up? Is there any issues with the rule books you'd warn GMs cracking it open about? Like, how do you like the artwork and the layout and stuff?
It's daring. The layout is daring. It's one of my favorite parts of this book. It breaks conventions purposefully. It's doing that on purpose to give you an uncomfortable feeling. the book makes you uncomfortable when you're reading it, and that's on purpose. And there are people who have complained online about this, about how, well, it's not as accessible, or it could be formatted better, or it's breaking some like typical conventions that most books should have, or as a GM, I really wish X was here. It's not disorderly. It's formatted funny. It flows like a waterfall. It feels like you're falling, and it's also, there are columns that are like tightening in on themselves, so they're very claustrophobic. And that is supposed to invoke this feeling of the game before you even play it, as you're reading through, which I think is genius. The dark colors, the gold foils, the use of the beautified offensive imagery, I think, is something that is very typical of like late 80s, early 90s style like alt photography, which I think is great. It should be incorporated in more games. It's not photographs, it's illustrations, but they're utilizing this kind of almost like reminiscent of I can't remember the guy's name. There's Mapplethorpe, who does a lot of like the close up nudes and stuff. And there is some aspect of that too, but there's another guy who takes pictures of corpses. That Nine Inch Nails video Closer was inspired by this photographer. If anyone in chat knows who I'm talking about, let me know. There's a really intense photo that he's taken. It's two and he did this with doctors and with med students and morgues and stuff. So everything was all on the up and up, and you got like waivers and sign-offs and everything else. But there's a very daring image of these two cadaver heads, these two men kissing, with like a cornucopia of like fruit and flowers, and it's a horrifying and beautiful picture. And it's two dead heads, and they're actually dead heads, and there's something very grim about that, and the artwork reflects some of that.
Yeah, that does indeed sound like super intense.
I wish I could remember the guy's name. I can't remember his name.
We'll figure it out, maybe hopefully by the end of the stream. But yeah, and I just like the artwork is insane. Like this is definitely not something you should. I don't know if I would bring Colt to like a public area for public reading.
I wouldn't either. I brought it to work once, and then I pulled it out of my bag and immediately regretted it. I'm like, you know what? Never mind. Back in the bag it goes.
Yeah, starting from like the cover itself, there's a lot of nudity, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of sexual violence, there's a lot of like near pornographic like type art. But it's all beautiful. It's all beautifully drawn or painted or colored, and I'm not even sure. And they're just doting the pages. Like I'm going through some now, and it's amazing.
I feel like we need to recognize who the artist is, because his art, is really good.
Yeah, the art director, Peter, or I'm not sure how you say it. It's two T's instead of one. Peter Nallo was the creative art director. Yes,
but he's not the artist. He's just the creative art director. So he kind of directed the direction of the art. He was kind of leading the charge there. I don't have the guy's name in front of me. I'm sorry. I'm so ill prepared for this.
Okay. Oh, I see. For the cover art specifically, there's Bastien Lecouf Deharme.
Yes, Deharme. Yes, such good art. Like very beautiful and frightening, and I mean, the cover alone really pulls you in.
Yeah.
And the intense Kickstarter. So the cover is a woman who's kind of like pawing at this necklace that she's wearing with these huge angel wings behind her that are strapped down with chains. And she's got this kind of like Baroque style halo behind her head. There's a shadow overcasted on her eyes, and her hair is kind of cascading on her shoulders. And she's wearing this, I don't know, it's almost like a Neo-Greek style gold belt with a flowing gown, and the Kickstarter had her breasts out, and you could see them. And for the retail version, I don't know why, they decided to kind of paint in a shirt or like a blouse over her boobs. And I kind of wish they didn't, because then that means that they would have to wrap the book up in plastic with like a big black like piece of paper over it, like they did for the first edition Tzimisce clan book, which would give it more of a mystery in retail.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy. I'm looking at it now. And like in the original art, she's like bleeding from like her nipples, that's crazy visceral.
Oh, is there more blood in the Kickstarter? That's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this is like the I guess the theme of the game, right? She was once a divine angel, now she is chained and suffering, and like this is you, right? Like you are this angel. As a character, that's you. If you were to see everything outside of the illusion, you would see your wings, you would see that you're strapped down, you would see that you're in a kind of cage. And
this is a great point to make as we go ahead into what I'm calling the setting section. You know, at its core, Colt's all about this idea that your mortals that we know are jailed, and they're being repressed of their desires and their forms, and that the idea that we're constantly looking for a way to break through this, whether through passion, madness, or sexuality. How as a GM do you portray that idea of breaking your natural limits to the player? And as a GM, do you want your players to like break free from their figurative chains that they have put that their characters are under?
I want their characters to break free. I don't want my players to. Like I don't want like. So Colt, I'm going to talk about some things that are probably people already know, right? Like Colt has an interesting juxtaposition against Vampire the Masquerade, and one of like even down to like the reality in which we live is called Elysium. Now Elysium's a word, right? It doesn't belong just to Vampire the Masquerade, but like, come on. I don't know which came first, to be honest. I don't know if Vampire came first or if Colt came first. So that's a good question, because it came out during the
90s, yeah.
Early 90s too. Like the game that I'm going to be running, Echoes from the Past, was written in 91.
Jesus, I wasn't even born then.
And there were people that were back in the day during like the first, I want to say in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, maybe. A bunch of people were putting together like fan stuff, like content, supplements. One of the fan supplements was how to play Colt with Kindred, with how to play Vampire the Masquerade Cult edition. Like your characters are vampires in this game, and you're vampires from Vampire the Masquerade. And so there's a whole system. It's cool. I have it. It's neat. It's really widely available. Google it. You'll find it. And there are people that would, in Sweden and Norway, would play this game because most of it was in Swedish. You couldn't find this stuff in English. Mm-hmm. Would play this game similarly to how Vampire was played.
Oh.
And covered in the news early on.
Like what, they would LARP it and then...
Yeah, like, like that whole like satanic panic, like these kids are playing this game too seriously.
Yeah.
And Vampire the Masquerade had the Rod Farrell in Florida who killed his girlfriend's parents, right? And he used to, I guess, play Vampire the Masquerade or whatever.
I did not even know about this. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. There's a book about it. Can't remember the book. There's a true crime book about it. It's really good. But to Embrace of the Vampire or something. But after that happened, Vampire the Masquerade got a really bad rap, especially because this was like the reawakening of like the second satanic panic. And a lot of it was targeted towards D&D with the whole occult thing and spellbook stuff and Vampire the Masquerade. So Colt in Sweden had a very similar situation happen, right? This is you're literally playing characters that are coming across demons, and then you come across grimoires where you can do actual demonology, and the spells that were in these supplements were based on real demonology. So these kids are kind of doing real demonology, right?
Yeah.
And these guys, I guess, committed some kind of murder or some kind of crime out in Sweden. and they were fans of this game. So this game, I think, was banned in England or Norway, one of the other sister countries, or
So
one of the other countries near it.
we're really opening up some like black box forbidden tech here, like forbidden texts here.
Kinda,
Like,
yeah. It's kind of like forbidden tech. I like banned books. This was banned. It's not banned anymore. I mean,
yeah,
it's widely available and released by Helmgast and distributed by Modifius Entertainment. I mean, this is a legitimate game with writers that and authors and editors and artists that we all know, and a lot of books. I mean, we could probably name some. I'm pretty sure Dixie Cochran was edited this book, the core book. I think she said she edited it. I know that Jacqueline Brooke had a major handle on a lot of the safety mechanics.
yeah,
A lot of the people like Petronello, who works for Paradox, I believe, who's also, I think, involved with V5. Like, there's the overlays are there. The overlaps between Vampire the Masquerade and this game. I mean, I didn't know until a couple of years ago that these games orbited each other, kind of.
really. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't even hear, like, I didn't even know about Colt until I met this group. Actually, I think the first time I ever heard about Colt was listening to you guys talk about it on Darker Days radio, and I was like, what the fuck is this game? Like,
That's dope.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like, you know what? A year later, here we are. But
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry for the obsession that you now have.
No, it's great. It's crazy to be like, oh, this game I really like has this like such this dark history, but like, not that I'm gonna say the history around it legitimizes it, but it kind of leads a little bit of credence that this, like, you know, maybe it's just like, it's like how Vampire is, like, you kind of feel like you're playing this like game that's, you know, you shouldn't be playing, like this forbidden, like I said before. But no, that's crazy. I hate to be like, the history around it makes me feel like even like more interested in it, because now I'm like, what do they see in it? But
yeah, dude, I wouldn't feel bad about that, because I'm totally there with you, man. Like, if you tell me that a book is banned in X amount of countries, I now want to read that book.
Yeah.
Right. If there's a movie that's like, I'm so easy. Like, even like in the, I think it was mid 2010s, they're like, there was a lot of those movies where they're like, you know, banned in Australia. And I totally want to watch it. Like, even if it's a bad movie, I'll probably watch it if you tell me that there are certain people in an area are not allowed to watch it. Or I read Catcher in the Rye. You know the only reason why I read Catcher in the Rye? That book sucks. The only reason why I read it was because some dude killed John Lennon and had that book in his pocket or whatever. I mean, this is something that it's a marketable, unfortunately. It's an unfortunately marketable aspect of a game like this.
It's kind of like the reason I feel like The Exorcist and like other they got big, is that was their whole marketing. But I digress.
You're right, though. Yeah.
So let's here we're gonna talk more. I just want to shed some more light on the lore-based parts of Cult, which, like I said, I didn't really think knew existed until I got the rulebook for myself, and I was like reading through, and I was like, holy shit, there's like a lot of lore in this book, and you know, I've hardly hear people talk about it. So if someone wanted you to give a quick abridged version of what's going on in the world of Cult, now I'm gonna help you out a little bit. I'm not gonna tell you to bridge everything. Can you explain to the audience at home what the hell is the Demiurge and his angels of death, or their angels of death?
So okay, so there are principles to the world of Cult. The idea, let's just talk in the world. There are principles in this world that keep things together, and they're based on. It's all based on the Kabbalistic tree of life. So they're very. The idea is that there's a fabric that reality and our world is made up of. So these principles are kind of like beings, right? They're kind of like I guess like these divine superpowered gods that are above time and space, that hold things together. but that are also at odds with each other. They're beings that don't necessarily, I guess, really like each other.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're not really into. There's a power structure that has been shattered. There was some kind of aggression, some kind of force that broke the agreement that these principles have. The demiurge is the source of all. The demiurge is like the godhead. The demiurge is the one who created everything, essentially. And there's also another principle which has created this prison, and there's another principle which forces everybody in this prison. And there's another principle which at once wanted to have everyone live to a type of potential, but now wants them to be driven into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these principles have a kind of like a reflective opposite, a mirror. And if you look at like the Kabbalistic tree of life, there's what's called the shells, right? Like it's like the reverse tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have like the darker side of these divine spheres, the darker side of this divine auras, and those in this game are the death angels. And the death angels are all very much alive and very well, and they are all fighting each other for control and for populace. They have these dark towers in a place called Inferno, which is like their own little kingdom. And the influence that they have on the world gives them that much more power in their own kingdom. And each one of these powers is sort of like a reverse side of a good principle. So it'll be, selfishness, greed, or hate, torture, these kinds of dark aspects.
Right, that's a very good place to start. So much like other systems, though, like Colt is all about, that hidden world right above your own, like the illusion that is our current reality. So as a GM, how do you start to lift that curtain and present the world that perhaps just something is just not right?
So the way that I like to, because everyone's a little bit different, because some people like to say that there are like portals that bring you to the different worlds. Because when you say worlds, I'm assuming you're talking about like Limbo and Inferno, Metropolis,
yeah,
etc.
Well, specifically I want to about like Elysium and the whole idea that there's an illusion around all of us.
I like to do this thing where whenever there's any kind of like stress experienced, and this is kind of systematized in the game, that it gets thinner. And so there's always fucked up stuff going on around us all the time, but we are so in our illusion, so in our own Elysium, that we don't see any of that. And the more stress that the players experience, then I give them a peek into kind of what's going on. So like, for example, in the driver, I put behind this house, there were these emus. Now they're normal emus. They're regular emus. They look like regular emus if you're like totally asleep. But as you become more aware through stress, you see that these emus have human-like faces. But if you were even more asleep, you wouldn't be able to see that. If you were even more aware or awake, they would look even more horrifying.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a gradual scale of things just looking more fucked up and fucked up.
And tonally too, right? Like if it's the beginning of the game, I'm not gonna like throw everything at everybody and say, okay, the entire illusion breaks down and you see everything. It's not. I don't like to do that.
And I feel like if you were to see the world for what it truly is, you'd probably go crazy like instantly.
Oh yeah, and you become a god.
And that's kind of the core of it. Divinity Lost. You're trying to get there, but maybe you're trying to preserve a little bit of yourself. But maybe that's the whole point. It's like, do you lose yourself to become divine?
Or did you lose yourself? Were you even yourself to begin with?
Yeah, that's true. That raises some great questions, like what defines who you are.
I like to think that like when horrible stuff happens to somebody in the game, and let's just say they like lose everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing things happen when you look at it in a different perspective, because now they're awake and now they have all these powers, and now they're able to kind of affect and impact the world as much as any other principle.
I like that. It's a good idea. So now it's time to talk about some of my favorite parts about it. Let's talk about the shadows, the demons, the creatures, the reflection of madness that inhabit the worlds of Colt. They're dark and they're visceral, but how do you like to depict and use them? Do you sprinkle them in? Are you like, let me give you a heavy serving? Are there a few that you normally are gravitate towards, or are there a few that you're like, I probably won't ever use these because of what they represent?
I like to sprinkle them in. I don't like to be so obvious with them. Like the lictors, for example. Lictors are these creatures that are around us all the time and look like regular people. But if the illusion were to drop just a little bit, or they were to allow themselves to be seen in their true form, they would be this like horrifying, disgusting, creatures that are that represent the principle that they're attached to. So like, I like to make them gross and goopy. I like to think of when you see the illusion drop, the flesh literally slides off of their skin. The skin suit that they're wearing kind of decays. But I don't like to put them everywhere. I'll have like one lictor in a room somewhere where there's people all over the place. Like in a prison, and there's a guy that comes in to do some of the questioning, and he's the only lictor that's really there. Everybody else is just a normal human being.
I'm looking at the art for them now. They are crazy looking.
And they don't have to look exactly like that either.
I like the whole the like kind of what you said, the describer of like just goopy and just a mess.
Yeah.
Ugh. Are there any, so kind of to go off of that, are there any that you don't really ever use because of their nature?
I would say any of, and it's not even, I don't know if I would not use them. Like some of the specific creatures that are related to like sexuality, I probably avoid a little bit. Mostly because we do a lot of stream games, right? I've only done a few non-streamed Colt games. So I don't think I would really press into the hard sex stuff with cults. So like a lot of like the orgiastic kind of creatures, I probably stay away from. There's a whole book on like, I think it's chapter 15, Beyond Passion, which I've read through a couple of times. I don't really use. Just because I don't really think it's totally appropriate to use on a stream game, but also
there's some crazy art in here, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there is. Like I would probably include that in like a home game if everybody at the table was okay with it. But I don't think I would go to like a convention and include
and be like, hey, we're playing with the orgy demons. We're bringing them out. Session 1. Hope everyone's comfortable with it.
Right, but at the same time, there's somebody, a person who writes, who's from Germany, who writes a lot of very erotic themed cult scenarios. You can't read any of it. It's all in German. I've begged them a couple of times on Facebook, like, please get this translated, because I totally want to read this because it looks really interesting.
Yeah.
The artwork is pretty cool. It's like a very cool like photo manipulation and very sexual, and not just sexual, but also it kind of leans heavy into that BDSM kind of sexuality and hard fetishes and stuff. And I don't think I would run any of those scenarios, but I definitely would love to read them.
Because there's actually a module, right, that they put out a little while ago. Because I remember watching it on Red Moon Role Playing.
Are you talking about the Kickstarter, or
was it the Kickstarter? No, it was legitimately just a scenario that there was like, this is from their new scenario, and it was I remember it was about you're trying to find this lost student, and it was about they had really gotten into this like heavy BDSM fetish stuff, and they had like set up this huge party called like 36 hours of like Saddam, and it was like this huge crazy convention, and he had been like doing all this crazy magic at it, and it's an insanely good
That's cool.
listen. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it, because I was like, you know what, I need to listen to something to kind of get my head around Colt. This is when I realized I was going to be in the SafeCon game, so I was like, let me listen to something so I know what to expect.
I haven't listened to this one. This is Red Moon Roleplaying?
Yeah, Red Moon Roleplaying does it. So they do a Colt game, and it's pretty good. They have another one, but I admit that because they use the players that are like some of the creators of the game, their native accents is coming through just a little too hard for me to really understand on a normal day, unless I was like really getting into it. But if you're someone that's good at that or has a better understanding than my small American brain, definitely go ahead and give that a listen to, because that probably is also going to be amazing.
So that scenario may very well be from the Kickstarter, which the Kickstarter is called the Horror Guide and Scenario Collection. There's two. There's a Beyond Darkness and Madness, and then Screams and Whispers, which there are two new source books that are right now available on BackerKit. The Kickstarter's done, but it may be from there. I don't think it's. The other scenario book is called Taroticum and Other Tales. I've read that book so many times just to get influence and inspiration from the games that I've put together, and I don't remember that. So this sounds awesome. I'm gonna listen to it.
Yeah.
Admittedly, if the closer I am to developing a cult scenario or start to play a cult game, I kind of avoid Red Moon role-playing cult games because I don't want to like ape them or accidentally steal from them, and like I don't know, I feel weird doing that.
No, I totally gotcha. I think that's you don't want to, because accidental plagiarism is like a huge thing that happens like all the time with artists, so I totally get you wanting to preserve yourself for that. Yeah, so there are so another big thing that's huge in like the source book of Colt, you know, the rule book, core book, there are numerous cults in the world of cults. I know you talked about not that being a huge focus.
Yes.
But to you, is the idea that all these cults are inhabiting the world all at once, or do you normally just pick one to kind of serve as the backdrop, or none at all?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of game I want to tell. So for example, the game that we were running for a while, which is kind of extended hiatus now at this point.
Yeah, we'll talk about Good Intentions a little bit later too.
We will. I might spoil it. I don't know where that's going, but I don't know. That one, there's like, I definitely had the cults that were in the book in mind, and I didn't. The idea that I was being inspired by in this game is that there are cults everywhere, but they don't always look like cults at first, just like any other cult, like NXIVM, for example. Now, NXIVM is a cult that I hope people should know about. It recently, the leader just got put in jail for like something crazy, like 300 years, for numerous things. More importantly, abusing women and human trafficking. And
oh my god, I do remember this. Okay, yes.
He had women like brand themselves and basically be a harem for it. It was awful. Like
there was a lot of like famous actors that were in there too, weren't they? They were involved.
There were a few. There's a couple of good documentaries about it. One on HBO, one on Hulu. I think Netflix probably has one now at this point. Stars, but like from the outset, for a long time, they looked like just another multi-level marketing company, right? And a lot of cults kind of look like that in modern day. Even things like Scientology, which is a cult in my opinion, is essentially a pyramid scheme, right? And this pyramid scheme at the bottom levels, just like any other MLM, just like any other multi-level marketing, is like fairly harmless, right? Just like in cult. Let's like bring it back to cult, right? Let's just say there's a cult. I think there's a cult in here. I forgot what it's called, but they're really big on like torture. I'm not finding it here, but they're big on like sexual expression and torture and that kind of stuff, right? And on the outset, it may seem just like a bunch of like rich swingers, right? Some of the people who may be getting involved in some of the wife trading key party type stuff, or maybe some of the people who are getting into some of the more like, intense and niche interests like suspension or any other BDSM group, like fairly normal, fairly tame. Everyone's being safe and everyone's an adult and there's consent involved and everything's on the up and up. But the closer you get, just like any other cult, just like any other corrupt organization, there's circles within circles, and within each entry of the circle you get darker and deeper into the more nefarious aspects of these cults. And I like to see Cult Divinity Lost kind of work the same way. This is my personal take. It doesn't exactly say this in the book, but I think this is the best way to incorporate this game, because if the game is about building tension, and if you have a cult that's central to that, utilizing the idea that on the outside seems normal, the closer in you get, the more dark it is, seems like the best way to go.
Yeah, I like that. And like, so your players could be coming across numerous cults each session, and they just would never know unless they get kind of drawn into that shit. Yeah.
You're also, but listen, man, you're also risking them going, that's whatever, that's not really a cult, see ya. And you're like, hey, okay. I got as big part of my scenario. Now I gotta now I gotta find something else.
And I gotta rewrite it. Well, I feel like most of the time, most players you get are going to be eager to. I know that's like me too. Like, I'm always eager to flip the let's get crazy switch. Like, I'm always on, let's trigger the trap.
Let's trigger the trap. This game is all about triggering the trap. I feel like with Cult players, all of my players always go, I'm opening the door, I'm going downstairs, I'm talking to that weirdo, I'm opening the jar and I'm drinking that liquid. You're like, Jesus, what?
I'm biting off the tentacle and swallowing it.
Right. Whereas other games, it's almost like, even like D&D does this a lot, where it's like, oh, okay, I don't know, I'm not gonna go down there, it's too spooky. Whereas Cult's like, no, spooky is the name of the game.
Yeah,
horrifying is what you want.
I think there's just an innate like reward to it, because yeah, your character might get fucked up, but that's all in perspective, right? Because what might be fucked up to you might be you're being enlightened in another sense. And I think that's the journey of your character that you want to take. So it's like, you're playing a horror game, lean into it.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, when we feel like, when we play like Call of Cthulhu, I'm always like super careful in that game, because the one thing everyone always tells me is, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And I have yet to die playing a game of Call of Cthulhu, because I've known that that's like a kill heavy game, so I just try not to.
Yeah, because as your character would be safe.
Yeah.
And there's also, but there's things that are like, Cult has systems that allow you to fight some of that. You know what I mean? Like, you get obsessed with certain things, and you have interest or distractions. One of the things that I really like is, especially with a sleeper game, you have these distractions. So you have something that, like, if you do like open the jar and drink that strange tea, right? Then something horrible happens. But then the next day, you go, well, my character likes to go home and listen to records and like zone out. And that's like my character's distraction. And it gives you like a little security blanket as a player, because then you can go, oh, well, I get my stability back up when I do that. So like, things are bad, but I can get back up to not bad with this really cool system. So I'm going to be more likely to drink that strange tea the next time I see it, because I know I could just go back home and listen to records.
Yeah.
And that's only if your GM allows you to go back home.
But in reality, like, you convince yourself you can just go back home and listen to records. But in reality, you can't go back home. You're not listening to any records.
No, or the records that you're listening to just aren't doing it. Or you are getting your stability up, but like, you start hearing things in the music that you've never heard before.
Oh, spooky. Another thing that I really like is the idea of like dreams. So dreams are a huge focus in Cult, where they can often show our players desires or visions of what to come. So that's normally an avenue that isn't explored by many other games. You know, we're not wondering in Vampire like what our kindreds are dreaming, or you know, in D&D what our characters' dreams mean to like me. So as a GM, how do you consider that new avenue of like being able to not only induce character change or reflection, but also like deliver like parts of the story within dreams?
I like to make dreams a part of reality. I like to make it not like I like to make it hard to decipher what's real and what's not, what's a dream and what's not. For example, like in The Driver, again, this is like my go-to example, I guess, for this conversation. There was a scene in The Driver where the somebody tried to pick up the phone and call like the mechanic or something to get their car fixed, and the guys on the other end have lost their minds completely and talking nonsensical. The whole number 9 thing. Great scene. Great part. It's a great opportunity for me to have the dream world communicate to a player character through the phone. So essentially, when they were picking up the phone, they kind of went into the tones of the phone, the beeping of the tones of the phone, put them into this kind of dream state where they slipped just a single toe into the dream world, into limbo. And limbo is communicating back to them. Dreams don't really make sense. And there's a scene. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, the show The Sopranos.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how they handled dreams, especially in the 5th season in that show?
I'm trying to remember. I know.
So the way that they did it was like they would start like in medias res, following Tony Soprano as he's doing a thing, going to the store, going to his psychologist, going and talking to whatever, going to the strip club, whatever. And weird stuff would happen. And there's one episode in particular in season 5 where like it's like 20 minutes where you're trying to figure out like, is he dreaming? What is going on right now? Like, are we in reality now? They never really I think they do finally show him like waking up, but it's a good 20 minutes before you really fully know what the hell is going on. Like at a certain point you're like, okay, this is obviously a dream. But then it goes back to him walking around in the world. You're like, oh, okay, he's no longer in the dream anymore. We're back in a normal scene. I like to do that with Colt. And I think I feel like it's a really, I have not done it successfully, but I feel like that would be a really cool way to get people to enter the dream world, to enter limbo, because you never know when you start dreaming.
Yeah.
You only know when you're in the dream. So to have your players enter the dream seamlessly from reality is something I've never been able to like fully and successfully do.
I mean, I guess it's just like play it straight until you wake them up, you know?
Yeah, like that night you're going to sleep and then you dream yada yada yada.
Well, what I even would be like waking dreams, you know? Maybe you're just, I always love the idea of like a character just nodding off and they don't realize it, and then all of a sudden you shift the tone and like they think it's real, but then it's like, oh, you wake up back in the seat you were in because you just nodded off for a second, and that's like the craziness that's following you.
Kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Right? Where they thought
micro
they're like,
naps.
and they woke up, and then all of a sudden they had the second dream, and they're like,
The false awakenings.
False awakenings.
Yeah, honestly, if I'm not a huge fan of the remake, but if the remake did anything really cool, I like that they actually incorporated like the idea of like, you know, you have these micro naps where if you stay up for too long or you're too exhausted, you will just seamlessly fall asleep for like a couple, like maybe like 5 to 10 minutes at a time or 30 seconds at a time, and it's crazy.
That's a real thing, though.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
I suffer from insomnia, and it's not like an everyday thing. It's every couple of months I won't sleep for a few days, or it'll be really hard for me to fall asleep, or it'll be really hard for me to fall back asleep, and so I'll only get like a half an hour of sleep in a night. So that week I'm a mess, and there was, especially when like high stress does this, like when I first had our first kid, and this is more to do with parenthood than actual insomnia. With my first daughter, my wife and I didn't sleep at all, really, for like the first, I would say, like 3 months. It was tough. we were both being superheroes. We're both new parents. We don't know what we're doing. So we're both like, yeah, I'll get up too. And then it, like, after a while, we became freaking crazy people. But there's a moment, and this could be dangerous. Like, if anyone has kids out there, you know what I'm talking about. We're like, you're like, okay, I did not sleep yesterday because I stayed up with the kid. I'm staying up with the kid again today. I'm now kind of mad at my spouse. I shouldn't be. I love her very much, but I'm kind of mad at her. And I've got this baby who I love very, very much, but God damn it, please go to sleep. Oh my God, please go to sleep. And you're holding this kid and you have the bottle in their mouth, and you don't feel yourself fall asleep. It's like driving. You're like sitting. You don't feel yourself fall asleep, but you go, oh my God. You're like, I was definitely sleeping for like a second. A little micro naps. Like your body just does it.
That's an awesome story to kind of share with that. So actually, Mr. Colt has just talked about it right now, and yeah, we have some parents in the chat, and that sounds about right. Every time I talk to a parent, that's the same like explanation they give me, and then I'm just kind of like, how could anyone want kids if that's the but I digress. Going into the next part of our setting, the last thing I'll talk about setting here, or maybe it's not. Maybe I'll probably dip into it when we talk about characters. But
we'll talk again about it.
Yeah, the majority of the game takes place in Elysium, aka what they would call the normal world, the illusory world. However, there are so many super detailed settings for places in this book. Like you have the Underworld, you have Metropolis, you have the Inferno. I would love for us to break it down, and we know we are going to break it down. But before we go to break, because we are already hitting the halfway point.
Are we gonna talk about this first and then go on break, or are we gonna go on break and then talk about it?
Give me the brief rundown first, and then of like the Underworld, Metropolis, Inferno, and then let's do a deep dive when we come back.
Like on each one?
Yes.
This is such a good stream. Okay, yes. All right. So do you want to do it? Or do you want me to work down?
No, you do it. This is your show. I'm just the host.
So we have the illusion, also known as Elysium. This is the reality that has been fracturing since the demiurge has left and disappeared. This is our reality. This is our day-to-day. It's you and me talking right now. This is the Elysium. This is the illusion. It's the world in which we live in. Then you have Metropolis, which at one point was like this. I think they call it the original city, or the first city. It's the very first city that was created in this like multiverse. Mm-hmm. There are like 7,000 different hills with 7,000 different castles on top of it, that are all now dead. There are these giant buildings that are all now like dead and half broken and decaying. There's like a dark urban landscape kind of thing. There are some creatures that are like kind of scurrying somewhere in between some of the mazes of buildings. And then you have Inferno. This is where humans are held captive, literally hell, where they're tortured. Within Inferno, there are what's called Purgatories. These Purgatories are like your own individualized hell. It's like your own little personal illusion where everything goes wrong. You have Gaia, which is it's kind of like the destructive nature. It is the worst parts of a forest, the most thirsty parts of a desert. Limbo, the dream world, we talked about that. This is where there's actually dream princes, right? In Limbo, which is a pretty cool kind of thing. Like there's these fae living in Limbo that are kind of fucking with people through their dream states. And then you have this Underworld, which is kind of this like all-encompassing darkness and void. I think in I could be wrong, but I believe in Metropolis, in the center of Metropolis, there is a well or a void or a pool of darkness that leads to the Underworld. And that interconnects, it's the intersection point of all of these worlds. So through Metropolis, you can essentially traverse to each one of these planes of existence.
Well, that's crazy. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm like looking through it now. Jesus. Like the abyss and everything and whatnot. Yeah. That's an amazing explanation. I am so excited that we're just going to gnash our teeth into all of this. So let's go ahead and go on a brief 5-minute break. I'm going to refill my water so those hydrates don't get ruined, although I probably will down it as soon as I get it. Not going to lie. everyone sit tight, do a little bit of vibe check, make sure you're still good with us. And when we get back, we're going to be cutting in deeper and deeper into the carcass and cadaver that is Colt.
Click that link that I just put in here, because it's the Kickstarter, which can lead you to the backer kit to order the horror guide and scenario collection. They're also making the very rare Bible Black edition, or Black Bible edition of Cult Divinity Lost core book, which is
no Bible Black editions. That's a different type of
different game. That's actually Big Eyes Small Mouth.
That's Tokyo Dark. Tokyo Blood. There's a system like that once. All right, whatever. I digress. That's a deep dive we won't ever get into. I don't know. If you want to see Deep Dive After Dark, let me know. All right, we're going on break.
BRB, guys. Don't go anywhere.
Don't Google that game. Give me a second.
Word.
Hey,
word,
and
word,
we're back.
word.
We're back, everyone. Please don't Google that. Or you know what? Google it. It's a free country.
What are we Googling?
Don't worry about it.
I won't.
Something. If you guys want, let us know if you want more of these like after dark streams or like anything crazy. If you want to see Gehenna Gaming really go off the map, really go crazy, let us know.
I'm talking 3 shots before we even turn the camera on.
I'm talking like I have a container of booze nog ready to be drunk before this. That's really how it should be.
I have a little Bailey's in the fridge waiting for me. I'm drinking tea and water right now, but I wouldn't mind a little how do you do?
If you all spam Oh yeah, VOD list once. Yeah, if you spam After Dark, I will play in my underwear. If you don't spam After Dark, I will still play in my underwear, and you will have to be subject to that.
So
So if
wait,
you don't,
are we saying hashtag Gehenna Gaming after dark?
I think so. I think I said I think I actually did a hashtag. I think it's Gehenna After Dark.
I love it.
But yes, Gehenna After Dark. Yeah, I'm down. You know, maybe go to when the conventions go back up and the vaccines are around. We all go around. We do some private games. Going
Yeah,
crazy.
let's get weird.
Yeah, maybe one of us gets stabbed. It's okay. You know, that's what happens again After Dark.
Whatever happens in After Dark stays in After Dark in the hospital.
And in the courtroom 6 months later.
The courtroom.
All right, let's jump back into it. This is what I'm glad I have Mark on. This is gonna be great. Mark, we're diving in. All right, so I feel like we've talked about Elysium enough, unless there was anything else you wanted to say about it. But if you think
Elysium's boring, Breaking Elysium's more interesting.
Fuck Elysium. Let's start with the land of the dead, the Underworld.
Yes, the Underworld.
Tell me about the Underworld. Tell us about the Underworld.
So I like to think of the Underworld almost like a dark shadow of Elysium, almost like a completely corrupted shadow realm, kind of where there are these mazes that are so easy to get lost in that feel reminiscent of things you know. There are mind traps and strange creatures that are kind of watching you every step in the Underworld. There are access points, little hidden access points, just like Elysium, to the other worlds. But there's this kind of ever-present devouring, kind of like the Nothing in Neverending Story, where things are perpetually being like destroyed and morphed, and it's almost like you're sitting on the event horizon and everything's getting sucked up all the time. So walls move, shapes change. There are spies, little spies that are put there, kind of by the archons, by the principled archons of the world. I believe there's even like cult leaders and stuff, little cults and survivor children that are kind of scurrying in this dark place.
Oh, it's almost like a like I guess that's what you would normally think, like it's just dark and cold and like very, very lonely. But there's some cool shit going on in there, is there not?
There is. So it's just like in Inferno and in the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, one of the greatest epic poems of all time. The greatest epic poem of all time. There is everybody knows it, right? Inferno's got levels, the circles of hell. The Underworld has something very similar. So there are different levels that you can kind of go through, and the deeper you get, the worse things get. So there's like this kind of close to the surface, everything's kind of okay, but things are starting to kind of break down. And then you get into
a labyrinth.
Yeah, I mean, quite literally. There is a labyrinth level, isn't there? Is there not?
Yeah,
I think
the
it's
labyrinth.
Like level 5.
Level 4.
Level 4.
Then the city of the fallen realm. It's just insane how much detail this gives you. Like, and I've never heard of for an entire chapter on this, and no one talks about it. Like,
here's here's my perfect game for cults. This is a game that I would actually really like to play, not run.
Is that a hint for me?
Yes, run Colt for me. But I want like an on-running game where you start in Elysium and you work your way through these worlds. Like, you can essentially have like a 20-year-long game. I don't know, 20 years is a long time to play a game, but like you can have a long-running game with your friends where you like for one whole year, every session that you play takes place in the Underworld. You start by entering into, the first level where you enter, you go down the wrong path in a subway tunnel, and you find the surface to this like black dark nothingness, and it compels you to crawl into this level. So for a couple of sessions, you start in the surface, then you move into the depths. That's like the next 2 or 3. You get into the borderlands. Things get really exciting there until you enter the labyrinth. Like the labyrinth could be 5 sessions where you're completely fucking lost and crazy stuff is happening. You go into the city of Kototnar, or is it Tonor?
I'm not sure. I'm never good with these fancy names.
It reminds me of the city of Dis and Inferno. Also, Divine Comedy. Read it. It's a great book.
Which is crazy because Inferno doesn't have levels. But we'll get to that another.
Yes. Yeah. I almost want the Underworld and Inferno to be the same place. And actually, I think in the second edition, it kind of was. And I don't know why the decision was made, if it was made consciously, to split these two things up. But I do like this idea of you're exploring darkness, and the darkness is complex. So it could be like Inferno represents the septic tank, and the Underworld is like you kind of circling down the drain.
Yeah. And something to note is like, so what you were talking about, the labyrinth is specifically, it's a place that goes to Metropolis, it's present in Inferno. Like you can go to anywhere from the labyrinth.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's almost as if like the creatures themselves that are coming through into Elysium could be using this labyrinth similarly to World of Darkness.
It's pretty awesome.
I also like the idea of people who die and go to Inferno and are tortured, escape, and if they were to escape Inferno, they would have to crawl through the horrors of the Underworld to get it back into the prison that is reality.
And like it details everything down to the very last level. And something I really like is that the book lays out moves and stuff that the GM can use when you're specifically in this world.
Oh yeah, there's the like the actual the moves, like the getting lost in the labyrinth, or separating your players as GM moves.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I think that's like, let you really classify and make it feel like it's dark as hell, I should say.
Did you get like a fantasy kind of feeling to this part of the book? Like I almost get like a grimdark kind of fantasy.
I mean, the idea that there's these other worlds, yeah, that there's something inherently fantasy about it, I would feel.
Well, not just Colt, but like the Underworld specifically.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. And I think when you look at like the cults themselves, like Atlantean Dreams and the Red Brotherhood, they do feel like, and the fact that there's guardians in the labyrinth, it does feel very like ripped out of a fantasy.
Kind of, yeah. And that's a cool concept too. Like you're playing this like this dark urban game, or that I interpret as very like
modern,
urban, modern. And then your players are all of a sudden in this like fantasy realm, this dark fantasy realm.
I mean, it kind of is what it is, like, because if the Underworld's been made since the beginning of time or close to it, then yeah, it's gonna have this inherent old nature to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, if it's that old, and if it's things that are easily destroyed are probably the newest.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's hard to destroy the old, like the most elder things. There's too much root and structure and all of it.
The creatures in the Underworld are pretty.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to talking about. That I love how there's creatures for each section of the book as well. Like there's something you could just, and maybe it's more of the art I'm like oogling over, but they're insane looking.
And they're usable too. Like it's not the descriptions of the creatures are only a couple of lines really. Like their stats, and there's a kind of what their attacks can do, but it's really up to the GM to give motivations to these creatures. They're quite literally tools at the GM's disposal. admittedly, I don't use them enough in games.
Is that more of because they don't show up, or because your players really never go into the underworld where they reside?
I think the latter. I think I never really allow them to go. I mean, shit, I should, but like, I'm a baby in the abyss, so to speak, when it comes to Colt. I'm a newbie in relation to some of the other players that have been playing for years and years and years. I mean, I know that even the new scenario book that was just kickstarted was written by some of these people have been writing like fan supplements
For
for
years.
years, and now they get to write like actual official supplements, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff you can branch out with it. So yeah, let's head to the next one. I think we've discussed the Underworld pretty thoroughly. You know, ideas and concepts. So let's talk about Metropolis. This is definitely, I think, my favorite. Just because it's like where humanity used to exist before, when we were gods.
Yeah, when we were divine, we had this city of, what is it, 7,777?
Yep, hills.
Hills, is that it?
Yep.
And it represents like all of our, when we were divine, when we were these divine creatures, which Colt never really gives us a name of what those creatures were called. But it's almost as if like we were almost on the same level as the Death Angels.
And that kind of goes to show you, like, why did we get tossed away? How were we overtaken so much? So
yeah, we have this Metropolis, this city that it gives hints on the things that we used to do, the lives that we used to live, the places that we used to be when we were these very capable, very enigmatic divine creatures. And so there's like a giant machine that kind of turns this world. And I think it's actually there's like a capital, right? Like a city, a machine city within Metropolis, but the machines itself kind of emanate throughout the entire world, almost as if before the fall we were like I don't want to use steampunk, but it's almost like this like steampunk kind of city, like
industrial, you know, like lower, like early industrial type. Yeah, definitely, for sure. I like that, and I love the idea of, like, you know, not to say like a concept from like Chronicles of Darkness, but I love the idea of like a god machine and like holy tech. I think that's awesome. I think the idea that like our religion is inherent in technology is a cool thing to like just think about.
Yeah, I do too. I like, it's something that's going to become a reality very, very shortly here within the next few years for us, as we get closer and closer to the great singularity where humans become obsolete and machines take over.
Oh boy, the Roko's Basilisk emerges.
Exactly. And actually, you know, I misspoke before. I said that it is Metropolis. It's called the Abyss, that circling dark shaft that is within kind of the center of this city. What's cool about this place too is that it also has cults, right? Like these little organizations of people that still live in this place.
That's crazy. So could you like assume that like maybe is that the goal for our human players? Like, is that one of the goals, to return back to the homeland?
Yeah, well, I think that the cults are made up of other players. I think that the people that are here that have gone rogue or feral used to be just like you and I, you know. And if so, that's the scariest part about this, that if you're with your friends and you're wandering this dark landscape and you come across these people who are threatening and scary and slightly recognizable as people, it's like that could be your fate too.
I really like that, like something that is interesting about the cults in the Metropolis is they're almost like good aligned cults. Like, I'm reading now, like the Prophets of the Third Temple, and then like when you go to the members, it just says like Orthodox Jews, and it's
they're Jews.
Yeah, and it's just like, we have the Holy Land of Metropolis, and we're, you know, trying just to push out all the Inferno. And I think that's just like awesome that ties itself to like real religion, real stakes, or the idea that like religion, if cult was a real thing, which it's not, which I want to say right now, it's not. Hopefully it's not. But if cult was a real thing, that like it might be masquerading in links to other religions, which I think is cool.
What a beautiful idea too, especially specifically with the prophets of the second or prophets of the third temple, is that they were all Jewish, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
this community of Orthodox Jews. That I think that there was something involving World War II and the Holocaust.
Yeah.
They suffered some kind of during it's like 1943 in Warsaw, something horrible happened, and there's like a door that opened, or just this community of people that were able to access this metropolis. And when you when you read the Torah, or when you are talking about the Jewish idea of salvation through a beautiful place like Israel, like Israel as an idea, not the country, but like
Yeah.
Israel as this like kind of holy idea that we're a people that have been kind of tortured and enslaved and treated like still treated like garbage, and treated like subhuman, anti-human, other human, other whatever. And now here is this place in which we can make ours, right?
Yeah.
So when you read like the Tanakh or the Torah, and you read about like Genesis, for example, Moses taking his people um, out of the shackles of slavery, right? Taking them out of bondage, and bringing them to a place that seems desolate, like the desert, and creating a beautiful place of salvation, freedom, and liberty. That's a beautiful idea, and taking that and putting it in a game like this, where you have a Jewish community that were in shackles, that were in slavery, and quite literally during the Holocaust, but also during like in game in Elysium, the prison of reality. And so taking your people out of that bondage and into Metropolis, which is a very scary and desolate place, and turning it into a kind of Israel, or kind of you know um, a place of salvation, or a place of safety, I think is a beautiful idea.
And something to note specifically about this cult, and I feel like that's like something to remember about cult. It's that the higher powers in the game that proceed over us, for the majority of them, they're all dicks. They're all horrible people. Even this, especially the angels. Like the last line I can read out, the cult, is led by this angel, this arcane, this
The
angel,
Archon.
yeah, the Archon, and the angel has no intention. Even says in the book, has no intention of letting these group of people into Metropolis. Like,
No,
yeah,
no, but it's but it's Kether, right? There's a crown.
yeah,
It's yeah. So they're corrupted. So when you look at like what the influences are, what the specific intentions of these archons or these death angels, it's almost like they're teasing these teasing these people with like a promise of something, but really it's like the carrot that they're holding in front of everybody's face.
yeah. It's insane, man. But but like going back to it, I love that their idea that there was like a city that we like, there was a paradise we used to be in, like an eternal city, and even like in the like in the creatures,
Yeah.
the creatures are just they're just the people we left behind, whether it be like the Asghouls who like were enslaved, or this the Techrons. Oh, there's some crazy. Oh,
How about
I
the angels? Like
yeah.
the Hayel Kodesh, and the Ophanim, the Erolim, the Sephirim,
Oh, that's insane.
or the Seraphim. Like
Yeah, I'm looking at
they're
them now. That's insane.
yeah, the Malachim. I mean, they're these are really interesting concepts that are like ingrained in things like Judaism and Gnostic Christianity, that are incorporated in a very dark game, which is pretty freaking cool.
And the cherubim, the Isham.
Yeah,
Oh,
Elohim. It's aspects of God. Like, and it's like is it the cherubim that have like the eyes all over?
Yeah, the eyes on the wings.
They're like the biblically accurate angels.
Oh, I love the orbs of light with the wings.
Yeah, the be not afraid. Whoa, your mind is being melted as these wheels within wheels are communicating with you.
Ooh, a double sip there. That's the kind of content they want.
Team hydrate.
All right, so I gotta ask now about. We're gonna go to the obvious darkest place of this Inferno.
Yes, I like this place.
You like it a lot. So, Inferno is just your typical like Hellraiser type dimension. It's your typical hell.
It's hell.
Yeah,
it's hell. There's fire. There's brimstone. There's mountains of coal.
But most importantly, oh, I forgot the music wasn't playing this entire time. Wow, that's
the music was playing this whole time.
It wasn't playing. No.
Oh, good. That's okay.
All right. No, I had background music, light background music. We fixed it. It's fine.
I like your style, man. You're fancy.
Thank you. You know what it is? Because you'll be talking about some serious matters, and then the music cue will just play it off. And I was like, that's that production style that you don't get anywhere else. I
feel bad. I can't even hear the music. But
you know
okay.
What?
Don't tweak anything. Don't touch anything.
When you go to the VOD later, you can tell. Mm-hmm. But yeah, kind of explode. Let's talk about and it's interesting because the death angels that we talk about, this is where they live.
Yes, and I need to. I feel like we need to take a step back for a second.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That's fine. You run.
I feel like we need to talk about the higher powers, the archons.
Yes. Tell me about the archons. Tell me about the clergy. Tell me about everything.
So because there's something that we keep mentioning it, and I feel like it's probably confusing. So there are these like invisible forces. There are these higher powers that represent these like inhumane, kind of otherworldly, ancient beings that are a result of ancient pacts and structures. With the archons, you have, and each one represents something. So each archon represents a principle, and each death angel represents a reverse principle of that archon. So there's kind of like a yin and yang kind of situation. With the archons, they're basically the manifestations of the primary principles. You have Kether, which the primary principle is hierarchy. Chokma, which is submission. Binah, community. Chesed, safety. And these are all Sephira on the Tree of Life. Gibora, which is law. Tippereth, allure. Netzach, victory. Hod, honor. Yesod, avarice. Malkuth, awakening. So each archon has their prior principle, and that's what drives them. Then you have, on the other side of the coin, just like in the tree of in Kabbalah, you have your regular tree of life, and you have what's called shells. I'm flaking on what the actual word is. Anybody into some like dark occultism stuff probably know what I'm talking about. I'm screaming at the screen right now.
Keep talking, okay. And I'll find it.
Find the word. I'm not good with my words today. I apologize. But with the death angels, you have Thalmiel, which equates to power. Chagidiel, abuse. Sathirel, exclusion. Gamachoth, fear. Golab, torment. Togarini, compulsion. Hereb Seraph, conflict. Samael, vengeance. Gamaliel, lust. Nahameth, discord. And so they're the more darker principles, the more darker aspects. So each one of these, the archons and the death angels, have their own symbols, right? For one death angel, it may be a tongue wrapped in barbed wire, or another maybe a book with nails driven into it, or it could be a door covered in blood. They all have a symbol that a GM can use to signify that you are now in the presence of this principle, or this place is under control of this archon or death angel. The death angels exist in Inferno. They live in Inferno. They can't exist anywhere else. And so they have what's called these black citadels. These are like these dark towers that each Death Angel lives like at the peak of. They have a throne and they sit in this dark throne, and there are horrible things going on inside of this building related to their principle, that are methods of torture for the people that exist there. And they all have their little piece of Inferno, and they're all kind of bickering with each other to get power in their own little areas of Inferno. And in order to get more power for their corner, their crag, their slice of the pie, they need to influence more of Elysium, or find a way to get more people into their black citadel to torture and to abuse and do horrible things. So within those towers, those abuses are done by their clergy. The clergy are creatures that, much like the Death Angel represents a principle, these clergy represent the Death Angels themselves. And the descriptions of these clergy are very, very much related to Hellraiser, the Cenobites. That's what they look like.
Yeah,
that's basically what they are. And so they do various things for the principal, or excuse me, for the Death Angels. So these creatures, the Nephirites, they can access Elysium. They can go into Elysium and do things for,
for their Death Angel.
Right.
Yeah. They're basically like enhanced, almost like. Is that not what cults strive to be? Is part of the clergy?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
The upgraded form. Yeah.
A cult needs, right? Like a clergy needs their people.
And
that's where the cults come in.
Crazy, just all this this ranking and business structure. Oh, and the word you were looking at before, it's called I can't even pronounce it. It starts with the letter Q. The Kilfahoth?
Clipoth.
The
Yeah.
Clipoth. The Clipoth.
Yeah. Clipoth. Yeah. Clipothic powers are the dark shadow sides of the Sephira. The Sephira exists in what's called a shell, and the shell itself is the Clipoth. There needs to be an emptiness for a divine element to exist in. So the Sephira, or the aspects of the divine, are all mirror aspects of both ourselves, the world in which we live in, and God. So the cool part of this little equation is that if God itself exists, it needs some kind of dark shell.
Yeah, which makes sense. We just got a question really quick, and something that I do want to just to go off the rails for just a second. So they've been wanting to ask, how does Colt transfer to other game systems like COC or Delta Green?
How does Colt translate to other game systems like Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green? The stability meter on the character sheet in Colt is very Call of Cthulhu. The less stable you are, the more easy it is for you to see into the illusion.
Yeah.
Delta Green, admittedly, I'm not too familiar with Delta Green.
It's just you're like FBI agents, and you're it's more actiony because you're taking down the Eldritch horrors kind of deal.
But this game does get there. Like,
yeah.
This is one thing we haven't talked about. This game is dynamic. So like, it doesn't always have to be like so brooding and, oh, we're lost and I am so sad that I lost my divinity. It's like, it can also be like, what the fuck is going on? This is X-Files and there are demons.
We are going to kill them.
We're going to kill. I have a gun and I'm going to shoot this fucking thing. So anyways, I just start shooting.
So I start blasting. It's just like, yeah, you thought you were playing Colt, but in reality you're playing Monster of the Week. You know, that's what you're.
It could be like that. It could be Colt. Could be Jacob's Ladder, high emotion, very intense. It could be Hellraiser, like crazy splatter gore fest.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, honestly, it could be like Predator. This game is very dynamic. You can make it. You can have it take place at any time, and you can go as hard or soft as you want.
Yo, World War II Colt. That's.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
No, it is a thing.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh God.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing. There are scenarios out there where you can definitely play.
I don't like the eye roll there. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, okay, because here's the thing: if you're playing a World War II Colt, there's going to be actual Nazis.
Yeah.
And so, how do you handle that in a way that is tasteful? And then, how do you play a game?
Yeah.
Because I've had conversations with people in forums about like, hey, I'm organizing a game with just my friends, and all of my friends are playing like low-level Nazis, and things are scary fucking shit is happening, and people are going, why are you playing? Like, why is it?
Yeah.
I get, like, if you're a teenage kid and you're like, I just want to be edgelordy and just play this fucking crazy game, and we're all Nazis, like, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like there's a slippery slope there.
I feel like the only thing I would argue in favor of the idea of being like, obviously, let's playing a bad character and knowing is very different from like accepting that, like, promoting it, because you can play bad things and be like, I realize they're bad. Like it's a game at the end of the day. We're just having peaceful fun, but in reality, the Nazis were known for doing these crazy, fucked up experiments that often had more, I don't want to say religious, but spiritualist type ties to them. Like, let's not mince words here. They were people that thought they were like the perfect race. So obviously, there's an idea of them themselves being divine. So I guess you could argue that you could do that's a place to start. But would you want to? Maybe for your own personal group, but probably not at a convention.
For like, I would, because as you're talking, like, I would definitely play a game. I don't think I'd stream this, and I definitely wouldn't play with strangers. I would play with like you and close friends.
Yeah. But,
like, I could see a game where, okay, we are all in a concentration camp. And there's this I could play, like, really dig into like a power fantasy kind of like, let's fuck some Nazis up.
Oh, like playing as the opposite side. Yeah, I think that's,
you know what I mean? Like, oh fuck, like all this horrible stuff is happening, and all that horrible stuff happens in real life. It happened in real life, and it's awful. And you could have a game where it's like, now that awful stuff has opened up the gates of something, and even more awful atrocities are coming through.
Yeah.
And as players, as you're discovering those horrible atrocities, just like I said before, the more horrible stuff you see or experience in this game, the more powerful you become. You can gain these powers and really kind of, I guess, play out a little bit more of a redemption.
Yeah.
That would be difficult to play at like a convention.
Yeah, people need to be on board with it. I mean, when you talk about like the Sephiroth and like, the Cabal, sort of like, you get these ideas, and like there are a lot of like
Kabbalah, yeah,
Kabbalah, sorry, not the Cabal. Cabal's totally the Kabbalah. You do dig into these more like occult type like connections, like Crowley and stuff like that. So so it's very inherent for the theme of things.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially because like Hermetic Kabbalah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, here's the thing about this game, that there are aspects that are sourced from Jewish Kabbalah, but it's more Hermetic Kabbalah, which is different. And even like the Qliphoth and stuff like that, that's more in the realm of, that's kind of a little bit stepping more into the realm of Hermetic Kabbalah. Mm-hmm. And even like the concepts around Gnosticism, Gnostic Kabbalism is something that is not really related to Judaism, so it's different, but it is kind of in our DNA, like culturally. I mean, like Freemasons are involved in like Hermetic Kabbalah, in symbolism and stuff. So having a game like this that takes inspiration from that is, I understand why.
Do you feel as, someone who identifies, with the, being Jewish, do you feel like having that in your cult drew you more like into the game, because you recognized?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
For sure. I don't, no, actually, I don't know. It's not so much as like, oh, okay, I'm Jewish and this game has some like Jewish themes that are attractive to me. It's more, I think it's more spoke to me on an individual level. It's only through like my retrospective understanding of what this game is and how does that relate to my own life experience and how does that relate to like my own questions about things like the divine or things like spirituality, or how does that relate to my upbringing and my identity. Is there like a one-to-one connection? I don't think so, but I think there is kind of a relativism to how I see my own personal interpretations of the divine to this game.
And like, hopefully someone isn't using the lore of Colt and being like, this is a real thing. Like, obviously we talked about that would be the wrong thing to do. We shouldn't do that. But I do think it's cool that we can like explore maybe our philosophies with it.
I think it'd be cool to like even have players have deep conversations like that in character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and definitely, and I think there's not a lot of games that do that. That's why I really like the deep dive, because sometimes I always and honestly it's happened at least once every game, because it happened with you, it's happened with you right now, it's happened with Miguel, it happened with Rick, and even happened with Wes. Like, eventually these games take us to a place where we really talk about something real. And not to knock some of the other games, but like I've never thought about my own religion and life philosophy while playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's all I'm gonna say.
I haven't either.
Yeah,
you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think because there's a kind of escapism with Dungeons and Dragons where you're playing somebody you're not in a world that is not familiar.
And that's the point. It is that like.
But this is it too, because it's a horror game, so there is escapism involved, but it's not so much power fantasy. It's not so much like I am a level 3 wizard and I've got my wizard stick. It's more like I am trying to survive in a world where horrible things are happening to me, and the power fantasy is that I can survive the worst stuff that could ever happen to anybody, because that makes the players feel like empowered in their own way. If I can experience this game or play this game and my character has all this horrible shit happening to them, then there is that kind of power fantasy that like no matter what the world throws at you, you will survive. You're going to be okay. And it feels like as dark and deep, even if you were to play a character who's like super sensitive and super hard to like deal with stuff, it that could also make you feel empowered, that like my character is a bit of a weakling and breaks down anytime anything happens to them, and I am much stronger than my character, which means I have strength as a person, not as a character, but as a person. I have that strength. Maybe
anyone that's looking like, my life is mundane, or maybe I feel stagnant in life, that's generally the type of thing, honestly, that I've been feeling for the past couple years. It's nice when you find a game where you're like, well, maybe just reality is different just a little bit if I peel back the curtain, or maybe it's the idea of like a normal person, becoming extraordinary, or at least getting themselves into extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, and so even kids, when kids play, I don't know if you remember when you were a kid, and you like thinking back at some of the pretend games that I would play either with my friends or by myself.
I don't like how
as a little loser with no friends and pretending things in the woods behind his house. Like, I remember there was a game I used to play when I was like, I don't know, I had to have been like 7 or 8, maybe 8, I don't know. But I lived kind of in the woods, and there was a forest kind of behind my house.
Well, that's so cool.
It wasn't big. It was
still, but you made it big in your mind, right?
It was huge in my mind. So I had these little places, these little spots in the woods behind my house that were like markers and important places. there were like these huge boulders that I like kind of thought of this of having some kind of significance. There was a weird shaped tree rock that made me feel uncomfortable. So like now that's like a dark, scary, like it could be a bad guy or it could be just like a dark aspect of a place. And so there's something about like the threat in kids games and these like pretend games that make you feel like most kids when they're playing, if you listen to them play, it's like help, I'm drowning, or I'm gonna attack you because you're attacking me. And it's a lot of like conflict, and it's a lot of like children trying to cope with their life experiences in such a way that they can kind of comprehend some of the more difficult aspects of their personalities, and also boredom. And what's more exciting than a major threat and something that kind of scares you?
And I think it's funny that you're like going off topic for just a second. The stuff that we used to play as kids was crazy. I remember we used to be at this daycare, and this uses a huge plastic like jungle gym type thing with a slide, and we would always like play make believe kind of deal, and we'd always go on this adventure, but they would always follow the same thing. There would always be a bad guy. I would usually play the bad guy. I think it's because I was the tallest. I also think it might have to do with there might have been a race thing to it too as well, now that I think about it, but I'm not going to get into that. And then there was always a bad guy, there was always a hero, there was always a person getting kidnapped, and there was always a climactic battle. And even though we in reality we were just like beating each other with like plastic toys and sticks.
They're whacking each other with little plastic rods.
Yeah, and like getting pushed down the slide. But in reality, we were on these like huge battlefields. Our reality was what we made it, and I think that's awesome. I could, even when I was like 13, I hate to admit this because it's kind of a cringy part of it, but me and my friends, we have this like huge park outside of where I live, and we would go through the park and we would pretend we were like going on journeys and like communing with nature, not like thinking we were magicians, but just getting lost in the woods for a day and
and like having these little pretend kind of adventures that, like, I think this is why I like tabletop gaming, because I miss, and I've always, it's not like oh well I started later on and I wanted to, I've always been playing these games, but like tabletop games, but like there's something about being a kid that it's so easy for you to slip into this fantastical world of fantasy that doesn't exist. Like as a kid you can kind of turn and look and you're like, see that's a giant, or at least it used to be before I slayed him. And it's like and you're, as a friend, your friend looks over and like can see the giant. Like it's so easy for kids to slip into kind of that fantasy realm, and I feel like these types of games allow us to do that because we're given the tools that as adults you just don't have the capability to. I've got bills I need to pay. I'm concerned about my kids' safety. I have a pandemic that is going to make this entire world lose their goddamn minds, and there are things that make it difficult to like forget about and just slip into this little state of fantasy. So having these games give you this like safe space and this amount of time to dedicate and tools to be able to like trick your mind into going to those places. And you don't ever really get there. Like your mind doesn't ever really go, okay, I'm playing this tabletop game and I definitely see the giant that was slayed. You kind of go, oh, I can almost see, my mind almost sees it. And you're kind of plugging into this little part of your brain that as a kid, it was so easy to unlock, and you have to trick yourself into seeing hints of mirages of this wonderful place that you used to go to when you were scared or with your friends. And I think this is probably a good segue to Jacqueline Brooke is developing a cult game, a scenario book. I think it's a scenario book, but it revolves around children in cults.
Yes.
So the idea, from what I understand, is that it has something to do with being a kid in this setting. And that's something that is, all the stuff we've been talking about is like, yikes, what about kids in this place? Like, that makes me uncomfortable. But just like Tales from the Loop, what if you were those kids? And how do you like interact with the setting as kids?
And honestly, I feel like a good place you can look at that would be like Little Fears. Well, the original version of Little Fears, which is kind of like before. There's two versions. So the second version, he kind of neutered it a bit. The creator, mainly because it was all this dark stuff dealing with children. But like when I look at Colt, I'm like, this reminds me of original Little Fears because Astaroth is in both of them. There's these kings and princes of hell.
Interesting.
And they're just like, instead they're like kidnapping kids that fall into, the closet land and all that, and enslaving them, making them do this horrible stuff. And it's just crazy. But so we only have about 30 minutes left. I do want to get into characters really quick and rolling piece and like just the idea of like making a perfect character for Colt, or a good character for Colt. I shouldn't say perfect. So I've noticed that there's different. You can play as a sleeper, or you can start out being enlightened. What is your preference?
That's the age-old question. It's $1 million question. So this is a powered by the apocalypse game. So there are the archetypes, right? You have the but you can essentially make it pretty much whatever character you want.
Yeah.
The one thing that makes this unique is that you have sleepers, which have no abilities really. Like you don't have any you don't have a dark secret, you don't have any disadvantages. I'm sorry, you have disadvantages, but you don't have any advantages. And you have to have like distractions, so things that keep you anchored to the world, like dating services, reality TV, shopping, drugs, whatever. And then there's all the other archetypes, the academic, the agent, the artist, the avenger.
But they're normally pretty like they're mortal, which I
they're mortal. They're mortal, but they have abilities, right? Like they have disadvantages and advantages. They have things that can give them they have powers basically. Mm-hmm. So and you can create your own archetype. I think, how do you start? If you're playing Colt for the first time, or if you are a GM and your players are playing Colt for the first time, start them off as sleepers. Have them discover the world of Colt to unlock it, because it'll feel natural to them, because they won't systematize it. They won't go, okay, I've got my advantages and I got this, and they start looking at the mechanics of everything. If you say, okay, you are all normal people, you don't have any special powers, you're just a general person, and I'm going to throw a lot of shit at you, and you're going to over a period of time discover what those powers truly are. And that makes it exciting. It also gives gives your players a reward system, and makes them feel like they're leveling up through the game. Mm-hmm. And you can surely base them off the archetypes. I mean, archetypes really are just a few stats, maybe a little background, and your occupation.
And it's cool because you can, playing a sleeper, you can become an aware, which is like what they consider, and then I think you can become an enlightened too through that as well. Yeah,
you can be completely enlightened. You can be like a deceiver or the cursed, right? Which are completely aware. One thing I didn't see though, which I think would be really cool, and I'm wondering if maybe this new scenario book would have it, but like, how would you? And maybe it's just me trying to break a game, but how would you play one of the creatures? And would that be interesting? Mm-hmm. Would it be interesting to play not an Archon or a Death Angel, but maybe like a member of the clergy?
Well, it's funny because they do have like special archetypes, like past what you're talking about, like Deceiver and Curse, called like, that's what I was talking about. They're called Enlightened. Like you have the Abomination and like the Death Magician, the Disciple, the Revenant, who are pretty much like supernatural in their sense. Right. They're not fully awakened to the point where they're gods, but they're getting close. Yes. So I guess that would be what you consider like a high-powered cult game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're like a black magician or dark magician or whatever they call it. Is it dark magician or black magician?
It's a death magician.
Is it death magician?
Yeah, it's like funny as the dark magician. I was like, we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh now. That's what we're doing.
Yu-Gi boy. That's right, Yu-Gi boy. Yeah, like a death magician, which is like frightening, right? Anybody could become a death magician if they fuck around with the occult too much. Mm-hmm. So read your Bibles, kids.
If there's anything you take from the stream, it's read your Bibles.
But I guess I maybe I do kind of want to talk. Maybe this is a good way to talk about the game that we had, because I know you kind of wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. I wanted so about Good Intentions.
About Good Intentions, the game that I was running on our channel for a while that kind of went on a little hiatus and never came back. It was very character driven, and it became a much slower burn than I had originally planned, just because I really love the players, and I mean, they're so good, and I just gave them the wide enough berth just to kind of go. My plan was to like kind of pick up the tempo a little bit and get things moving, but ultimately we stopped because scheduling became a little bit of a bear. I'm not going to say it's not coming back, but I'm going to say that I'm starting a new 5-episode miniseries tomorrow, so I'm not even going to think about Good Intentions until that's over. But it's very character driven. We had these characters that were sleepers, all of them sleepers, and I guess not to spoil anything, if anyone who's actually in the game is watching this, I guess earmuffs, but the idea is that they are going to awaken throughout this game.
Yeah.
Every player character has a dark secret, which is something horrible happened when you were younger, whatever that horrible secret is. Could be a couple years ago, could be a couple of months ago, could be yesterday. This game was meant to be, your dark secret is this. You're discovering your dark secret together, and that dark secret is so nefarious. I kind of want to spoil it because it's such a cool idea.
I you know what? I know this is the deep dive. We're going in deep. Before you spoil it, though, I do want to know. Pick your brain.
Yeah.
How did you get like? What was your first idea? Just so I guess when you were a GM, like, how did you come up with the concept that this is Good Intention? This is the game I'm going to be running. Like this. This is the story I want to tell.
I wanted to explore trauma, starting at the very beginning of a group therapy session. That was the very first seed of the idea. I wanted to open up with people being in a group therapy session and getting, like, interweaving themselves through this crazy adventure, and then finding at the end that they were interconnected to begin with before they even knew it. I also, originally my plan was this is going to take place in New York City, and I even like overlaid the principles over the city, and I wanted to have like different parts of the city be influenced on one principle and control of one death angel over another. So basically it's the New York City essentially would be this kind of map of hell. But then kind of fell on the idea that all of the people, all of the player characters in this game, essentially were all made a trade. They were in Inferno at one point, and they traded a loved one, a family member that they loved, who was alive and not in Inferno, and put them in their place so that they could live back in Elysium. So the whole idea behind the game is that they're searching for their missing person, and the dark discovery that their missing person is, yes, being tortured in hell, and they put them there.
Yeah. And I'm guessing rescuing them would mean a fair trade back.
Oh yeah, quite. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they would need a fair trade back, so a difficult choice would have to be made.
So I guess it's like, I guess I'm trying to tie the title of the game. I guess it's like you had good intentions when looking for, you know.
Yes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea, right? Like your intentions were to save yourself, and you did, but you put a loved one there, and now your personal hell, this could also be, I guess, maybe a kind of purgatory. Your personal hell is that you were obsessed with finding this person, and everybody doesn't give a shit about the person that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Whether it's your mom who you're missing, and no one cares. Whether it's an ex-girlfriend, people don't remember who the fuck she is. Whether it's a sister or a brother, like no one, the cops stop looking, no one cares. All the lictors that are controlling the systems have made sure that that you don't find out, or no one finds out what happened, because then that means that more people would wake up, because they don't want that.
Yeah.
And it becomes this like very difficult theme to explore emotionally, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with it.
Damn.
Where I want to go with it.
That was amazing. Now I can only imagine what tomorrow's gonna hold for us, to be honest. That was so. I guess what I want to go into. So what's your GM? You've set this out. You know when you're. I'm using good intentions because it's an example that we can kind of spoil, but we can pick it apart.
Yeah, and people will forget. So we'll start the game up. We'll come back, and then people will forget about this conversation. So this is good.
That's good. That's how you do it. So when you're setting up the game and like you were like planning it out, did you just have? Because okay, so a lot of times when they tell you when they run games like D&D, they're like, oh, you shouldn't like have everything written out. You have a framework. But sometimes some other RPGs you need to have it, especially stream ones. Like sometimes I feel like nowadays as I go in, players want a sense of a somewhat of an informal railroad. You know, maybe they don't want to be like forced onto the path, but they want a nice guideline to go through and a little bit of wiggle room. But I feel like rarely people want to enjoy the whole sandbox experience because that's not a fun game. That's not like a story driven game, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I this is my personal frustration. I always get slightly disappointed if it's spoiled to me that like there was no plan at all for this game.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something about that makes me feel like, oh well, okay. I mean, it's fun. I had a good time, but I don't know. There's something about this expectation for a GM to prepare, and I put that expectation on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're asking how much did I prepare for?
Yeah.
I can show you.
Or how much of a framework did you put in? Oh my God! Please say there's like a tome of text.
Yeah, there's my gut check folder or notebook.
So do you physically write your notes down? See, I type everything on Google Drive, so if anyone ever hacked my Google Drive, I'm not saying what they would know. Oh my God.
So I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah, a little bit. I can't like read it though.
That's because I have really bad serial killer handwriting.
So you've handwritten all your notes.
Yeah, so like
why don't you type them up, you madman?
So this is the New York overlay that I was talking about.
Okay.
And like some notes and some scenes and stuff. So I just started. Oh yeah, and like here's like this like connecting.
Awesome.
So I start with like the notebook and I start kind of penning the ideas down, just because it's easier for me to like organize all my crazy thoughts into one web. And then I make an outline. Like I'll create the NPCs. I will that are key, all the key threats, all the NPCs and monsters and creatures or whatever that have motivations. And then I'll put like attitudes and like speech patterns and stuff, little notes for myself to know how they speak and whatnot. And then I'll do like an outline. So like, you know, scene 1, these are the things that are going to happen. These are some of the oddities that could happen. These are some important notes. I'll even write out little intros that I'll read out loud. And then like if they do this happens. If they don't do that happens. And yeah, it's it gets a little wild. Like I think my good intentions book or scenario document is like 50 pages right now.
You hear that, Helmgast? Throw some money at Mark. Let him know that you want good intentions to be published.
Oh, that would be good. Takes place in the 80s, New York City. Come on.
So the last thing I want to talk about before we get into our like last little segment that we always do, well, actually maybe one or two things. First, when making an ending for Colt or a Colt game, one shot or a campaign, do you think it's something where it's like your PCs need, you know, it's better the PCs achieve like all out victory, whereas the idea of Colt is just getting out alive and surviving another day?
Oh, it's a symphony, and
an unholy symphony.
An unholy symphony, a dark symphony with no sympathy. I think that it needs to come to a point. There needs to be a catharsis, or there needs to be like a breakdown and revelation. Everything needs to come to an emotional point, and this is just how I do Colt. Like it's hard to describe. Like I can feel when it's not quite ready, when it's not quite done baking yet. Some of it's time, if it's like 9:30 and we're done at 11:30, okay, let's let this last a little bit longer and push it out or whatever. But at a certain point, it needs to come to an apex. It needs to like come to a major point, and this major thesis needs to kind of expose itself. Or major choices need to happen, and sometimes the players will give it to you. In the drive, to be honest, Rick gave it to me. Like Rick's descent into insanity and dark, like he embracing his darkness, is something that like became this thesis that I didn't even know was going to be part of it. For the game that was connected to this game, which was not streamed, which was only for patrons, it was an emotional catharsis, and I think a very moving one. That one beat me up emotionally a little bit by accident, because the players that I was playing with were so good, and those two put a 3-dimensionality to my 2-dimensional NPCs that I didn't even know was really all that possible. The fact I fell in love with the woman in the driver, for example, through the patron game, because I didn't realize how interesting that character was until that game. So as far as ending it, like things need to go so off the rails and so off the rails and so off the rails that like now, like there needs to be like this, there's like a pause that happens when all the players go, what the fuck just happened? And everyone's kind of sitting in it. In the green room, do you remember that? Do you remember that point where like it was kind of, it's dead silence for a second, and you could feel it. It's like, okay, this is the end. Like you could feel that this is like coming close to the end, because all the players have gotten to this point of, oh my God, like this, your stability as a player almost went down to zero.
It was a very emotional game, and
yeah,
definitely a lot of that, like obviously due to your whole setup. I think a lot of that was due to Ellie as well. Just really, she really fucking role played the shit out of that last scene, and so did Zach, and so did Ian, so did and so did I. They were amazing.
You did too, dude.
I'm gonna, to quote Doctor Who, they were all amazing, and you know what? So was I.
you were absolutely amazing. All of you fit like a perfect puzzle piece. Ellie put this punctuation on emotion that made my, to be honest, it's not half baked, but it wasn't. I didn't put as much love into the green room as I did, say, Good Intentions. However, the green room actually I did organize in a way that could be published. Like it's almost like it reads exactly like a scenario book.
Yeah.
But she put this like emotional punctuation on it. You put this like real life kind of slice of life kind of underpoint to it. The selfishness of each one of us that exists in all of us, and the will to just get by, to get through this. Zach put this, he really encompassed the idea of the dark secret. His dark secret never really was exposed at all.
But it informed his every decision.
Every decision. He was a stalker that was obsessed with his band. This didn't come out during the stream, I don't think. He was pretending to be a representative of the record company when really he was just this insane stalker, right? And so like his very fate was so appropriate. Ian's ability to show how someone who has gone through so much trauma is able to be the strongest person in the room. Oh yeah, I've seen this shit before. Fucking light a cigarette. And there's something about that strength from people who have gone through a lot, or who are seemingly on the dredges of society, or we're looking at people that are like who are doing a lot of drugs, or partying hard, or living the rock star lifestyle, even though they're not playing an instrument. But when shit hits the fan, those are the types of people that you want on your side, because they can keep shit fucking together.
Yeah.
And there's something about that inner strength which I really, really dug about his character. But yeah, all together, it all fit. It all fit so nicely.
A very good answer. Man, we've had so many good interviews on the show, and Mark, you were just another one to add to the Hall of Fame.
Thanks, buddy.
No, seriously, this is great. I've never wanted to play a game as much as I did until this, like, legitimately, like, I really want to play Colt now. I want to log off. It wasn't the fact I have work in the morning. I want to log off and play a game right now. That's how excited I am for it. The last thing I will ask you, before we go in a little segment. So we talked about, like, we know what the ending of a game is. This is just kind of a general question. It's just because we're talking about emotion. What do you think is the most, if you can tell us, what is the most intense emotion that you have seen, like, from a player that you've seen either at your table while you were GMing or one where you were a player in? And can you tell the story about it? Because I feel like with Colt, I feel like that's what we need to talk about. We need to talk about the, like, players really, getting emotional with it.
Yeah. Yes. So, I'm gonna protect identities here.
Okay.
So, excuse me. So, there was a game, and if they're watching, they know what game I'm talking about. Where things got a little intense. And everything was kind of above. We were all above board, as far as, like, consent, red lines, and everything else. But ultimately, there were some difficult choices I had to make. I have this NPC that I really like to introduce into my game, where he basically demands a sacrifice, but he's so vague about it that the sacrifice can be anything. Honestly, it could be anything. Like, it's so easy to be like, here's a penny in my pocket, and he would let the nightmare end. But most people go, oh, you want to sacrifice? I'm killing that person. Oh, you want to sacrifice? I'm scooping my own eyeball out. Oh, this person went, oh, you want to sacrifice? I'm slicing my wrists. And it got a little intense. And even, like, all the players were like, ooh, whoa. And it was really emotional, because it wasn't like, ha ha ha, slice, hee hee hee. It was like, I'm doing this. I don't want to, but he needs a sacrifice. There's no way I'm getting out of this. I don't care if I get out of this. I want you two to be safe. That's all I care about. I want you to be safe. I want you guys to keep living. I'm now giving my life to this thing, and I'm going to die. And it's obviously suicide, so it's sensitive.
Yeah.
And everyone has had some kind of brush with suicide in one way or another. Myself has seen it in very, very personal, very gruesome detail with people who are very close to me, and so facing this kind of stuff is difficult. It's not easy. But I'm not squeamish, and that's okay. And the player wants to have this type of involvement in this kind of thing, and it's totally fine. But I think the context in which it was, we just want to go home. Like this, we're just done. This was the summit. I was running the summit, and they're like, we just want to be done with this nightmare, and so I'm going to kill myself for this, for you. I'm killing myself for you guys. And it's like, well, that's a shitty deal. Fuck. And afterwards, like, I punctuated it with a little bit of, like, a silly circumstance with one of the other players, and he's a really funny guy, so he kind of rolled with it, and things lightened up very quickly. But there was a moment where, like, oh fuck, we're just like, we're looking at suicide in a very weird context.
Yeah.
And it got dark, and everyone was okay. And I talked to everyone individually afterwards and made sure, like, hey, listen, things got a little, like, dark and close there. Are we okay? Like, first of all, I'm sorry if things, went across, if there's any lines that were crossed, and, they're like, no, absolutely not. But things got really dark. And so this game has a tendency to kind of have those moments of, like, oh, shit's getting real. Like, we're playing a game, but, like, it was real and emotionally real, I guess, is what I mean.
All right.
I don't know if that was a good answer.
That's a great answer. And then the actual question that I just remembered I needed to say, I'm briefly go down the products, and you tell me if you think they're good, if you would recommend them on circumstances. All right, 4th edition core rulebooks. Obviously, you want to get that. Would you recommend that people get the Black Edition or maybe even the Pocket Bible Edition?
I want both of them, but that's because I guess I'm a cult collector. But no, I wouldn't suggest them. I think that the Black Edition is too expensive. It's basically the same thing as a regular book. And then the Bible Edition is really cool to have, but that's all it is. The core book is a little more usable. It's expensive. It's like $100.
Yeah, I mean, the book itself is like $50-$60, but I thought it was like...
Well, no, I know. Yeah.
But to be honest, it is a 400-page book.
It's worth every penny.
Yeah, worth every penny. What about...
I would pay $100. I would pay over $100 for the Kickstarter edition of the printed version. Like I would pay like $200 for the Kickstarter edition.
Okay.
But that's just me because I'm a collector. If you're just curious about Colt, don't get that.
All right. What about the Black Madonna?
Get it.
Get it?
It's a great book. It's a great module that it spans across time. It's great for people who want to get started and have a long running game who are new to Colt. It's definitely more than a few sessions. It's a fun one. Black Madonna's great.
All right. The Tarotacum and Other Tales.
Tarotacum is amazing. First of all, The Summit from Matthew Dawkins is one of my. It's such a non-typical cult scenario, but it's one of my favorites of all time. Tarotacum itself is also a very, very good scenario for like multiple sessions. You can span that out for however long as you want. And there's also a nice little framing to the actual tarot cards.
And then the Scream of Whispers, and what was the other one?
Scream of Whispers and Screams and Whispers and Beyond Darkness and Madness.
Okay. And so one's a source book, and then
so if you're a GM, get the Beyond Darkness and Madness. This is a resource. This is a tool. This has locations. I imagine it'll have maps in there. It'll have characters, NPCs, anything that has GM tips from Kult Divinity Lost is a must because it's some of the best GM tips I've ever seen in any game.
Yeah, and there's some great names on this. Okay, so they're not out yet though.
They're not out yet, but you can order it when you go to the Kickstarter. Go to the backer kit.
Yep, I see it right there. And then Screams and Whispers.
Screams and Whispers is a scenario collection. I can't say whether it's worth it or not. I don't know because I haven't seen it. I need to see it first. I'm doubtful.
And then you're doubtful. Okay. Ooh.
A little bit. I'm disappointed, I guess. I want it. I really wish that because there's so many scenario books. I really wish that they did a place geography kind of world specific source book, like a deep dive into each of the worlds of Gaia, Metropolis, etc.
I would say, and my background behind me, that's from Screams and Whispers. That's the cover art for it.
Yeah, great art.
Believe. And then the last thing I see on here is the oh wow, so you would get that core rulebook, the $700. That's the one you would buy, is the one you're telling me.
Which one?
The core rulebook, the Elysium edition. Is that the special Kickstarter special?
I would get the. So this is kronar. This is not dollars.
Oh no, I'm.
$79.
I'm a fool.
So the are you talking about the black edition or like the leather bound one?
It looks like it's the leather. The one it's called the Elysium edition. It's white.
Oh yeah, it's $800. No, I would not buy that one. Don't buy that one. I don't want to say don't buy that one if you want. I guess if you have money, but I wouldn't. Here's the thing. Like it's really pretty and it looks like it's bound in flesh, so I really want it, but I don't think it's worth almost $1,000 for. And the one I was talking about, like the Kickstarter of the core book, the one with the woman without the blouse, that's the one I would pay like $200 for. This is cool, but I don't know what
sell it anymore, do they?
No. You I mean, it's not. They don't. It's not printed
Yeah.
anymore. So I don't know. Like this one is like it's like leather binding with like gold and metal finishing. It's cool. It's a great collectible, but I don't know. Like $846 is a lot of money.
Wait, okay. So the one I'm looking at is six. Is it in what's that word? What's that KR?
Kronar?
Yeah. So $6.99 to dollars is. Let's see. Let's do a quick comparison. Oh, $82. All right, I guess that's not as bad.
No, that's a regular book. Yeah,
Okay.
that's $82. Yeah, 700 kroner is about $80.
Yeah, okay. All right, sounds about right. All right, I think we've done a pretty good. Would you say we did a pretty good job in delving deep into Colt today?
I would say one more thing though.
Yes, tell me.
Products wise, the tarot cards as a GM are invaluable. Get them if you have a chance to get the tarot cards. They're amazing. The way that you use them to build out a scenario, I'm still trying to figure out how the hell to use them in game, but to use them to help build your scenario, I think it's really valuable.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. Man, I'm just saying, if anyone's in the chat that wants to donate to the Buy Nick the Physical Edition of Colt Fund, let me know.
Get us that $800 leather bound. This is a great deep dive. I enjoyed the hell out of this conversation, Nick.
Thank you. It's you know what it is. You know, I'm about to put the hope music on because that's what we do every deep dive. Mark, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, man.
You're definitely someone that I feel comfortable with, and I don't think I could have done this episode talking about some matters like this with someone I didn't know. So far, I've had 2 of the 3 High Council, who are all my good friends, on the deep dive. We'll have to get Ian in someday, but Mark, we were supposed to do this earlier. I'm really glad that we're doing this. I'm really glad I'm doing the game with you. You've climbed to the top of this mountain, nearly about 3 hours talking about this game, going through madness, hell, and everything else, and you've arrived at the summit. Now I've only got one question for you.
Yes.
How is Mark Q. Anderson doing right now?
I'm doing better than I have been all year. I feel healthier. I feel happier. I feel less desperate than I was earlier this year because the pandemic really, and the lockdowns and everything else, like really took a hit on me and my family. And I'm feeling fucking amazing. This conversation was talking about one of my favorite games of all time. I enjoyed it. I really enjoy this game. I'm glad you're a part of tomorrow's game. I'm glad that you're going to be in Echoes of the Past every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on twitch.tv/Gehenna Gaming. And I'm glad that you're a part of Gehenna Gaming. From the moment I met you at PAX Unplugged, I said, this kid is one of my favorite people that are playing this game right now. And I was telling the boys that too. I'm like, yo, when this group comes into play, they sit wherever the hell they want. I think you played twice, right? 3 times?
I only played once, unfortunately. I got it at it was literally the last game of PAX Unplugged with Rick. So you know
I
what?
gotta say, you came back
Yes.
and chatted with me, and I enjoyed the hell out of that conversation. And then you getting involved with all your design, all of your video production, all of your Twitch production. This deep dive series is my favorite. One of my favorites that we do on the stream. Like, dude, you are a good egg, and I'm really glad you're a part of this journey that we're making with Gehenna Gaming.
And we won't stop until we reach the mountain, and then some, until we leave the orbit. Mark, you're amazing. You told everyone what you got planned. Is there anything else you want to drop? Any hint before I make my closing announcements? Anything else you want to give us? That you're allowed to. Oh,
Listen to Something in the Way by Nirvana before you watch this game.
okay. I will definitely do that. Everyone, thank you. We have 2 more episodes. I am happy to announce that in 2 weeks, we'll be having our double part finale. So December 15th into December 28th, the season finale of Deep Dive. We did it. We reached the fucking end finally. And we're having an amazing guest. We're having Jacqueline, Jax Brick herself. And she's talking about one of her favorite games, Changeling the Lost, the trauma simulator game, as it's always been to refer to as whenever I've been told about it. It's going to be an awesome deep dive. It's going to be 6 hours of us talking about the inherent consequences of the Fae and its death dealing. It might be darker than this talk we have. Probably not, but there's always a chance.
6 hours. Can you ask her a little bit? About the safety mechanics in Colt?
Oh no, I will definitely put that on the list. Well, it's because it's 3 hours each episode, so we're doing 2 episodes, so about 5 to 6 hours for the total thing, and we are ending that, and it's gonna end. So you watch out, December 15th, December 28th. This is how we end the deep dive season 1. But I'm super happy. I've gotten so many awesome people on here, from Mark all the way back to Wes. I can, I would never, like I said, I never would have talked about it with anyone rather than you, Mark. And I appreciate everything you do for us.
Hell yeah, man. Anytime you want to chat about anything, obviously, you know where I live. But also, talking about Colt is one of my favorite things to do of all time. Can I make some plugs?
Yes, plug your shit. Please plug your stuff.
Okay, so follow and maybe consider hitting the subscribe button for Twitch here. If you're watching on YouTube, which I believe this is coming on YouTube, make sure you hit that bell and hit the subscribe button. I don't know what they say, but just follow our shit. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, Gehenna Gaming everywhere. You can follow me on Twitter at Marchosius with 5s instead of S's. Make sure you check out the actual play of Colt tomorrow at 8 p.m. That's every Wednesday for 5 sessions. Listen to the podcast, because the last episode had a very, very, very interesting teaser for a audio actual play of Vampire the Masquerade called Kindred Stories. Some more announcements coming up about that. And be good to each other. Be patient with each other. Be patient with people that you don't fully know. Be understanding of people who aren't in the same position as you or don't have the same perspective as you. Be kind to everyone that you interact with, but at the same time, don't take any shit. And understand that you are not always the smartest person in the room, and there's always going to be somebody who's more capable. And surround yourself with those types of people to inspire you to do great things.
Another dry in the room tonight. I think that's an amazing thing. The only thing I'll say is you can follow me at Nobleman Nick. If you would like to, you know what? I think I want to run a Colt game. If the patrons want to help me run a Colt game, do them. Big Dad said, yo, 5 us buy in exchange for a game. Sounds like a good deal. I'll take that offer any day of the week. That could be for any game, honestly. But yeah, maybe I'll run an extra game for the patrons. Let's see what happens there too. So
yeah, dude, run an extra game for the patrons.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about having you run some games for the patrons.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Give the practice my Colt skills on them. So
dude, is that the game that you're gonna run?
What is Colt? Yeah, I could take a swing of that. I would really want a physical copy, but I can take a swing with a PDF I have.
Hell yeah, dude.
Well,
to be honest, I'm going way past time. I'm sorry, but the PDF is usable as a GM, but the book itself is so good to absorb that info.
I know. That's why I just want to be able to sit in my room and read it at night and have beautiful dreams after.
I like to lay down on a bed and fold my legs up like I'm on the phone chatting about the boy in class.
I'm gonna read it just stark naked.
Yeah.
Looking at the penis monster in this pages.
It's covered in blood.
Yeah, covered in blood. Because that's the only way you should read Colt, to be honest.
Yeah, you should. You should be palming yourself and flipping those sweet pages.
All right, everyone, have an amazing day. I love you. We love you. Mark loves you. Maybe not as much as he loves me, but he loves you just the same.
I love you more.
Everyone, have an amazing day. Thank you for watching the deep dive. You're all great. And peace out.